Today, we're going to cover some of the caving and cave diving disasters that we have covered on this channel. Be sure to subscribe for more videos like this. Before we dive into today's video, make sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss any updates. We upload daily. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe and join our amazing community. Now, let's get started. Bell Island is a small island in Newfoundland, the easternmost province in Canada. In 2007, mostly outside of the public spotlight, the island witnessed one of the most extraordinary stories in the history of underwater cave diving, and one of the sport's most shocking deaths. This is the story of the ill-fated international mission to explore Bell Island's abandoned mines. The story begins decades earlier. Around the turn of the 20th century, Bell Island became an invaluable resource thanks to its large deposits of iron ore. Mining companies, such as the Nova Scotia Steel and Coal Company, developed a major mining site on the island. They called the site Wabena. Even today, Wabena remains the main settlement on the island, and it's where the vast majority of its residents live. Bell Island and its Wabena mine reached arguably their peak of international importance during World War II. The Allies heavily protected the island, and it was even attacked by German submarines in 1942. This unsuccessful attack would go on to be known as the Battle of Bell Island. After World War II, the island experienced a steep economic decline. By April of 1966, all of Bell Island's mine shafts were closed. Although the island remains densely populated, its population has been slowly decreasing ever since. In the early 2000s, Newfoundland's Department of Tourism knew that something had to be done to remedy the province's enduring economic woes. Opening Bell Island's abandoned mines and underwater shipwrecks to international tourism was one of the ideas put forward. But, in order to potentially open them to the general public, the sites first had to be explored and analyzed by professionals. No one had visited the shipwrecks or traveled down the closed mine shafts in decades. Local officials knew that to ensure the safety and security of visitors, they needed expert assistance. This takes us to the formation of the mission. In the summer of 2004, the Bell Island Heritage Society granted permission to a select team of international divers to begin exploring the Bell Island mine. They were Eric Van Dorn, Steve Lewis, Debbie Stanley, and her husband Rick Stanley. Steve Lewis, who later wrote a book about the mission, describes their first dive as, quote, "nothing more than a quick splash." Their goal at this early stage was to find out if diving the abandoned mine was even possible to begin with. They were given an old map from back when the mine was still in use. The map covered several square kilometers of underground tunnels and chambers. In theory, the mine should still look roughly the same as the old map, but at the time, nobody knew. There could have been major cave-ins, or there could be prohibitively poor visibility, or blockades. There was only one way to find out. After meeting at the entrance to the long-abandoned mine, the group strapped on all their equipment, including heavy-duty cave lights for each cave diver, and, perhaps after saying a quick prayer, they plunged into the cold, uncharted darkness. Lewis describes what they saw on that first dive as a, quote, "dusty museum." The long, gradually downsloping tunnel that had previously been traversed by minecarts was now filled with water. This tunnel was designated by the map as the number 2 shaft. Lewis and his fellow explorers swam down the number 2 shaft, descending many meters in no time. They soon reached an intersection and turned left, discovering what looked to Lewis like a stable for horses, now eerily submerged and ghostly empty. The group also came across tons of machinery and tools. They even found a pair of boots. Haunted but intrigued by their findings, the group eventually made their way back out of the mine and onto dry land. Stunned, they slowly lumbered uphill with their heavy equipment. Rick Stanley began going on excitedly about how the mine was spectacular, that there was stuff everywhere, that it was fantastic, and that he needed a rum. Above water, at the main staging area, there was another large map of the mine on the wall. Lewis says they traced the distance they had covered and found that it was, in his words, quote, "a tiny L-shaped squiggle." Despite all they had already seen, the group had barely even begun to explore the extent of this enormous underwater museum. One thing was clear to everybody involved: further exploration was definitely warranted. In light of the promising success of their initial mission, Lewis and the others were soon joined by a team of divers and surface support volunteers. Having proven the mine was indeed diveable, at least for professionals, the next mission involved 12 divers total. Steve Lewis was chosen to be the leader of this larger, more thorough expedition. On February 1st, 2007, the team began what was intended to be a 10-day series of dives throughout the Bell Island mine. Lewis, along with underwater photographer Vlada Dakina, went in first. Initially, the mine was exactly how Lewis remembered it. But upon descending further, visibility started to worsen. Thick silt the color of iron ore began obscuring their surroundings. Lewis describes it as having been, quote, almost like a blizzard seen through a car's windshield in winter. The walls of the mine began slowly disappearing. Next, the floor and the wires began to fade. Even with their cave lights, it got darker and darker. Then, Lewis says, Vlada herself disappeared. This abruptly halted the pair in place. After a harrowing moment or two to get their bearings, the pair decided to continue on, even if, for Vlada, there could be little chance of any useful photographs. Their gamble paid off. The silt eventually cleared as they moved on. The team would later discover that snowmelt from the surface formed a muddy underground river, and this had been the source of their sudden lack of visibility. While ultimately not an issue, it was perhaps the first time that Lewis and the team had encountered unsettling danger in the Bell Island mine. It would not be the last. Although slightly shaken, Steve Lewis, Vlada Dakina, and the rest of the team were excited that the mission was now officially underway. In the coming days, underwater visibility improved. The team soon uncovered a seemingly endless list of underwater marvels. The mine proved to be, as indicated by the old maps, a vast subterranean network of tunnels, galleries, and rooms. The rooms varied in size, from claustrophobically cramped to dozens of meters across. The team also kept finding artifact after artifact, mostly disused tools and pieces of machinery. They also found numerous personal items belonging to mine workers of decades past. They even found spots along the wall where mine workers had used lampblack to write things. These literal cave drawings, which hadn't been seen for at least 50 years, included cartoons, messages, and even memorials for dead workers. Halfway through the 10-day expedition, things were going very well. The dive team continued to make progress exploring and assessing the mine's conditions. It was looking like Bell Island would indeed have an opportunity to open as a tourist adventure attraction, and an incredible one at that. On February 5th, 2007, 2 team members were making their joint way through the mine collecting data. Divers on the mission always traveled in pairs as part of safety protocol. One of them was 51-year-old Joseph Steffen. Steffen was the only American on the mission. Therefore, he was the only one in the group who cared that, back in the U.S., Super Bowl 41 was currently underway. He was looking forward to getting back to the hotel that evening and hopefully catching an overseas broadcast of the game. At one point, Steffen turned to his dive partner, who happened to be one of the diving safety officers on the mission. He indicated that he would like to return to the surface, but alone. That was strange. It was strictly against protocol for diving partners to split up for any amount of time. According to Steve Lewis, Joe Steffen was an experienced cave diver. He was also ex-military and a career cop. At the time that he made the suggestion that he surface alone, Steffen also still had plenty of air in his tanks. So, what could realistically go wrong in this scenario? Of all the daunting and dangerous tasks that were assigned to this exploratory group, simply swimming back out of the number 2 mine shaft into daylight was probably the easiest. No silt, no tight passageways, and virtually no chance of getting lost. Just swim straight toward the opening. No one at the time saw much of any issue with Joe Steffen making his way out of the mine alone, even though it was technically against protocol. But then, Steffen never surfaced. Baffled and horrified, several team members, including leader Steve Lewis, dove into the number 2 shaft. There, they quickly found Steffen. He was only about 300 feet away from the entrance, at a depth of roughly 50 feet. They motioned to Steffen to get his attention, but got no response. Stunningly, he was unconscious. Lewis and the others carried Steffen's cold, wet body up to the surface. He was rushed to a nearby hospital. A young doctor, who Lewis sympathetically guessed was probably just out of medical school, soon entered the hallway with a clipboard in his hand. With sad eyes, he told Lewis and the others, all of whom were in complete disbelief, that although they had tried everything, they had been unable to save Steffen's life. He was gone. In what seemed like the blink of an eye, this promising diving expedition had taken a severely dark and twisted turn. But what made it even more stunning was the fact that Steffen's sudden death seemed completely impossible to explain. Steffen had somehow met his demise within sight of the exit. He had been swimming through a wide, straight tunnel with plenty of air in his tanks and years of experience under his belt. What possibly could have happened that stopped Steffen in his tracks so close to safety? As fellow divers, friends, and family all grieved, they also awaited the results of Steffen's autopsy. Perhaps some explanation, some answers, some way to make sense of what happened would be found. A few days later, the results came in. And while they definitely shed light on the nature of Steffen's death, they were far from resolving the whole mystery. The autopsy revealed that Steffen had suffered an arterial gas embolism. This is a condition almost exclusive to underwater divers. It is related to an infamous condition popularly known as the bends. When a diver suffers an arterial gas embolism, it means that a nitrogen bubble has appeared inside one of their arteries and blocked it. Still, this was surprising, given that Joe Steffen had only been about 50 feet deep when the embolism apparently struck. How could this have happened to such an experienced and competent diver? Beyond that, why did it happen? Why did Steffen suddenly wish to return to the surface in the first place? Why did he insist on doing it alone? Had something gone wrong? Torturously, his friends and colleagues realized that they would probably never know the answers to these questions. After the bewildering death of Joseph Steffen, the diving team made their sorrowful way back to the hotel. The idea was floated that, in honor of Steffen, the group should all watch the Super Bowl together. It was a touching idea, but according to Steve Lewis, they just weren't in the right state of mind to watch a festive sports game. Instead, they chose another fitting tribute to their fallen friend. They sat around the fireplace and watched Monty Python's The Meaning of Life. That night, many voiced a concern about whether or not the diving mission should continue. Some felt it would be disrespectful to do so. But many others, including Joseph Steffen's wife, Jennifer, felt that Joseph would want the mission to continue. He would want the rest of the mine to be thoroughly explored, and the goal of approving it for tourism to be achieved, even if in his absence. So that is what the team decided to do. As snow threatened to begin falling any minute on Bell Island, Steve Lewis and the remaining team members headed out the very next morning, put their gear back on, and re-entered the mine. Over the next 5 days, the team completed exploring the Bell Island mine. It proved in the end to be even more wondrous and intriguing than any had anticipated. But now, there was another adjective that also applied: deadly. News reporters naturally became much more interested in the exploration of the mine after hearing news of Joseph Steffen's death. The idea that a mine, which had taken the life of a professional diver, was being considered as an open tourist attraction understandably raised some eyebrows. But ultimately, the mission was successful. Today, the newly drained number 2 shaft at Bell Island Mine is open to the general public. Instead of donning diving gear and plunging into a murky abyss, visitors young and old strap on hard hats and walk along pathways laid out by Steve Lewis, Joe Steffen, and the rest of that brave dive team back in 2007. The work they did allowed the disused, largely forgotten site to become a place of education, the honoring of history, and best of all, tourism revenue for the region. We hope you enjoyed this video and found it informative. If you enjoyed this story and you would like to learn more about it, we highly recommend Steve Lewis's book, Death in No. 2 Shaft. It was a major source used for the creation of this video, and there's a lot more interesting stuff covered in it beyond what we covered today. Tell us, would you have returned to dive in the Bell Island mine after your colleague had so suddenly and mysteriously died? Share your thoughts with us in the comments section below. Thank you so much for watching, and please be sure to like the video and subscribe for more content like this in the near future. That's all for now, and we'll see you next time. Three young explorers set out to conquer Valhalla Pit, a place known for its beauty and hidden dangers. But what started as an exciting adventure quickly took a terrifying turn. As one climber ascends, a sudden earth-shattering noise echoes through the cavern. What truly happened in those moments deep underground? And how did this thrilling day turn into a night of uncertainty and fear? Stay with us as we unravel the chilling mystery of Valhalla Pit. Valhalla Cave, located in Alabama, is one of the most awe-inspiring natural wonders in the region. Like many pits in the area, Valhalla drops through almost all of the Bangor limestone. The top of the pit is deceptive, measuring about 40 feet long and 20 feet across. At first glance, it might not seem very large, but it's only when you back over the lip that the true size of the pit becomes apparent. The entrance feels less like a narrow shaft and more like a massive canyon whose ceiling has collapsed. Large chert nodules near the top and shale layers by the lip suggest that the top of the pit is probably in the Pennington limestone, further adding to the geological significance of the cave. Valhalla Pit is a breathtaking natural wonder, measuring about 50 to 60 feet across. The descent from the usual rigging point on the low side of the pit is a thrilling experience, with a drop of 227 feet down to a large talus pile at the bottom. The first 50 feet of the descent keeps you close to the wall, providing a sense of security as you begin your journey down. However, after those first 50 feet, the drop becomes a free fall, with the pit dramatically widening as you descend, creating a sense of awe and excitement. This widening, or belling out, at the bottom adds to the unique character of Valhalla Pit. The pit is located on a steep hillside with a cliff towering above it on the uphill side. A dry stream bed runs down around one edge of the cliff and up to the edge of the pit at one end. This stream bed only carries water during times of heavy rainfall, so it's usually dry during most caving trips. The natural setting of Valhalla Pit is both beautiful and rugged, with the cliff and stream bed adding to the dramatic landscape. At the bottom of the pit, on the downhill side, there is a concave undercut known as an alcove. This feature provides a sheltered area within the pit and adds to the overall complexity of the cave's structure. The combination of the pit's size, its steep descent, and the natural features surrounding it make Valhalla Pit a remarkable destination for cavers. It's no wonder that it's often described as the most impressive open-air pit in the state of Alabama, and even in the entire Southeast. Beyond the main pit, Valhalla Cave offers about a mile of mostly narrow passages. These passages require a lot of crawling, with some sections allowing for walking. The cave is generally maze-like and muddy, adding to the challenge of exploration. However, right off the main entrance pit, there are three smaller but still impressive domes. One of the most notable is the Waterfall Dome, which can be accessed either by a small hole in the breakdown of the main pit or by climbing to a ledge about 80 feet off the floor. The Waterfall Dome is over 160 feet tall, and during the spring, an impressive waterfall cascades down its walls, creating a stunning natural spectacle. Valhalla Cave is a challenging and rewarding destination for experienced cavers. Its vast chambers, unique geological features, and historical significance make it a must-visit for those who are up for the adventure. On Sunday, June 10, 1984, a group of 18 enthusiastic cavers gathered to explore Valhalla Pit in Jackson County, Alabama. This trip was part of the Southeast Regional Association's Summer Cave Carnival, an event that brings together caving enthusiasts from all over the region. Valhalla Pit is known for being one of the most impressive open-air pits in Alabama and possibly in the entire Southeast, making it a popular destination for cavers seeking adventure. 3 students from Georgia Tech, David Zern, Samuel Crawford, and Michael Hahnebaum, were among the group of 18 cavers who were exploring the depths of Valhalla Pit in Jackson County, Alabama. Samuel Crawford, 21, and Michael Hahnebaum, 20, were both passionate about caving, and they approached this expedition with excitement and curiosity. David Zern, along with Crawford and Hahnebaum, were the last of the group to descend into the pit that day. The others had already completed their exploration and left by the afternoon, while the Georgia Tech students lingered to explore the passages at the bottom of the pit. They rigged their ropes at the usual low side spot, a common entry point for cavers descending into Valhalla Pit. This location provided a 227-foot drop to the bottom, starting with a 50 feet descent against the wall before opening up into a free fall. As the day ended and evening approached, the students remained deep within the cave, captivated by the mysteries it held. Shortly before 7:30 p.m., David Zern decided it was time to ascend. He began the long climb back up, while Samuel Crawford and Michael Hahnebaum took shelter in an alcove at the bottom of the pit. This alcove, a concave undercut on the downhill side, was a common resting place for cavers waiting for their turn to climb. It provided a small measure of safety and comfort in the otherwise vast and imposing chamber. The climb was strenuous, but Zern was experienced and methodical. He had made it about 100 feet up when he suddenly heard a terrifying sound echoing through the cave. It was a loud, thunderous noise that shook the very walls of the pit. "It was incredible, like an earthquake," Zern would later describe. The sound was so powerful and unexpected that it filled him with dread. Fearing the worst, he shouted down to his companions, hoping for a response. But there was only silence. For several agonizing minutes, Zern hung there on the rope, yelling and waiting for any sign of life from below. The silence was deafening, and the realization that something terrible had happened began to sink in. Desperate and shaken, Zern quickly finished his climb, racing to the top of the pit. He ran to Hahnebaum's vehicle and drove to the nearest house, where he frantically called for help. When rescuers arrived at Valhalla Pit, they discovered a scene of devastation. A massive section of the cave wall, measuring about 30 by 30 feet, had collapsed behind where Crawford and Hahnebaum were sheltering. The enormous slab of rock had split in 2 as it fell, and the sheer weight of it, estimated to be between 50 and 250 tons, had crushed the 2 cavers instantly. The rescuers were faced with a grim task, recovering the bodies of the 2 young men from beneath the massive rock. The recovery operation was challenging and heart-wrenching. One of the cavers, Samuel Crawford, was partially visible from the shoulder blades up, but the other, Michael Hahnebaum, was buried under the center of one of the slabs. The rescuers knew that there was no hope of survival for either of the men, but they were determined to bring them back to the surface so that their families could have closure. Digging beneath the massive slab was not an easy task. The rescuers had to work carefully and methodically, knowing that any sudden movements could cause further collapses or endanger their own lives. It took hours of painstaking effort to finally free the bodies of Crawford and Hahnebaum. The weight of the tragedy hung heavily over everyone involved, a stark reminder of the dangers that caving can pose, even to the most experienced explorers. The news of the accident spread quickly through the caving community, and the loss of Samuel Crawford and Michael Hahnebaum was deeply felt by all who knew them. They were both passionate about caving, driven by a love of adventure and a desire to explore the hidden wonders of the earth. Their deaths were a tragic reminder that caving, while exhilarating, is never without risk. The caving community came together to support the families of the victims and to honor the memory of the 2 young men. Samuel Crawford and Michael Hahnebaum were remembered not just for their love of caving, but for their kindness, their intelligence, and their adventurous spirits. Their loss was a profound one, and it cast a shadow over the Southeast Regional Association's Summer Cave Carnival that year. When you're at the bottom of a deep pit, you naturally look for the safest place to wait. It's only human to want to find a spot that feels secure. But sometimes, even when you think you found that safe place, you're still vulnerable. If there isn't a safe spot at the bottom, the only option is to move into a nearby passage, hoping it's safer there. Unfortunately, for Samuel Crawford and Michael Hahnebaum, they chose a spot that seemed safe at the time, but nature had other plans. We can't blame them for being where they were. Caving is an unpredictable adventure, filled with hidden dangers that can be impossible to see until it's too late. As cavers, we do our best to avoid risks. We watch out for loose rocks hanging overhead, check if the walls around us are stable, and test footholds to ensure they won't give way. But no matter how careful we are, there's always a chance that something could go wrong. The truth is, caves are never completely safe, and that reality is something every caver has to accept. The collapse that took the lives of Crawford and Hannibal was a tragic reminder of this harsh truth. They couldn't have known that a massive section of the cave wall would come crashing down, and they certainly couldn't have done anything to stop it. The spot they chose seemed as good as any, but in the end, it was a decision that cost them their lives. For the rescuers who were called to the scene, the task of recovering the bodies was a heartbreaking one. There was no hope of saving Crawford and Hannibal, and that made the job even more difficult. Body recovery is the most difficult duty a rescuer can face because it means that the story has ended in the worst possible way. There's no joy, no relief, only sorrow, and a deep sense of loss. Yet, despite the overwhelming sadness, the rescue operation was carried out with great care and professionalism. Numerous agencies, along with the news media and fellow cavers, came together to ensure that the recovery was handled as smoothly as possible. It was a moment of unity, where everyone worked together to bring the young men back to the surface, so their families could perform their last rites. As the rescue teams carefully dug through the rubble, they knew that they were doing more than just a job. They were helping to bring an end to a tragic chapter in the lives of the victims' families and friends. There was no thrill in the recovery, no sense of accomplishment. Instead, there was a quiet determination to do what needed to be done, to face the grim reality of the situation with strength and compassion. In the end, the recovery of Crawford and Hannibal bodies was completed, and their families were able to lay them to rest. The caving community mourned the loss of two of their own, and the story of that fateful day at Valhalla Pit became a part of caving history. It served as a sobering reminder that, no matter how careful we are, the underground world can be unpredictable and dangerous. For David Zern, the experience was a life-changing one. The memory of that day, the sound of the rock fall, and the silence that followed would stay with him forever. He had been the last to see his friends alive, and the weight of that knowledge was something he carried with him long after the rescue operation was over. Yet, even in the face of such a devastating loss, Zern continued to honor the memory of his friends by sharing their story, hoping that others would learn from it and approach caving with the respect and caution it demands. As we come to the end of this journey, we're reminded of the power and unpredictability of nature. In 1977, 3 brave explorers ventured into the depths of Valhalla Cave, unaware of the unexpected dangers that awaited them. With nothing but their courage and a rope separating them from the unknown, what started as an exciting adventure quickly turned into a life-or-death situation. We'll unravel in this video the mystery of what really happened deep within the cave. How did their journey take such a terrifying turn? Valhalla Cave in Alabama is one of the most amazing natural wonders in the area. The main feature of the cave is Valhalla Pit, a breathtaking hole in the ground that is about 50 to 60 feet wide. When you first look at the top of the pit, it doesn't seem very big, only about 40 feet long and 20 feet across. But as you start your descent, you quickly realize how huge it really is. The drop from the usual starting point is 227 feet down to a large pile of rocks at the bottom. The first 50 feet of the descent are close to the wall, which feels a bit safer, but after that, it's a free fall as the pit widens dramatically, creating an incredible and thrilling experience. This unique shape, where the pit bells out at the bottom, is part of what makes Valhalla so special. The cave is set in a beautiful but rugged area, with a steep hillside and a cliff towering above the pit. A dry stream bed runs along one side of the cliff and ends at the edge of the pit. This stream only flows during heavy rain, so it's usually dry during most visits. The natural landscape around Valhalla is as impressive as the cave itself, with the cliff and stream bed adding to the dramatic scenery. At the bottom of the pit, there's a sheltered area called an alcove, which adds to the cave's complexity. Beyond the main pit, Valhalla Cave has about a mile of narrow, maze-like passages that are muddy and challenging to explore. Some parts of the cave require crawling, while others allow for walking. Right near the main entrance pit, there are 3 smaller but still impressive domes, including the Waterfall Dome. This dome is over 160 feet tall, and in the spring, a beautiful waterfall flows down its walls, making it one of the highlights of the cave. Valhalla Cave is a challenging and rewarding adventure for experienced cavers offering stunning natural features and a rich geological history. On the afternoon of Saturday, September 3rd, 1977, 3 cavers prepared for an adventure into Valhalla Cave in Jackson County, Alabama, a vast and impressive cave known for its deep and challenging entrance pit that would soon turn into a life-threatening ordeal. The cavers, eager to explore the depths of this magnificent cave, were a mix of experience levels, but they all shared a passion for the thrill of discovery. However, their enthusiasm would soon be tested in ways they had not anticipated. The group consisted of William Seiler, a 58-year-old caving enthusiast with years of experience, Kent Birchfield, a fellow caver with a solid background in vertical caves, and a third member whose name has been lost to history but was known to be less experienced in such challenging environments. The group had planned this trip meticulously, knowing the dangers that could await them in the depths of Valhalla Cave. They had gathered all the necessary equipment, helmets, harnesses, ropes, carabiners, and the knowledge they believed would guide them safely through the cave's intricate passages. Their goal was to explore the cave's vast chambers and perhaps discover something new, adding to the cave's storied history. Before heading to Valhalla, the cavers spent the morning checking their gear and discussing their plan of action. They knew the importance of safety in such an environment, especially when dealing with a cave as formidable as Valhalla. The cave's entrance drop, a sheer 227 feet, was not something to be taken lightly. They checked their ropes, ensuring they were strong enough to handle the descent and that they had enough length to reach the bottom. However, in their eagerness, they failed to double-check the exact depth of the pit against the length of the rope they had brought. The plan was for William Seiler to go first, given his experience and calm behavior in such situations. The less experienced caver would go second, with Kent Birchfield going down last, ready to help if needed. They prepared the rope, which seemed long enough to reach the bottom of the pit. The cool air of the cave entrance, mixed with the excitement of the upcoming descent, created a sense of both excitement and fear among the group. As Seiler began his descent, he felt the familiar tension of the rope, the weight of the harness, and the thrill of venturing into the unknown. The first 50 feet of the descent kept him close to the wall, offering some reassurance. But as he continued, the cave opened up beneath him, and the drop became a free fall into the dark, vast chamber below. Unbeknownst to Seiler, the rope they had rigged was about 10 to 20 feet too short, a crucial miscalculation that would soon lead to disaster. As he got closer to what he thought was the bottom, Seiler suddenly found himself without support. The rope had ended. In a scary moment, he fell the rest of the way, crashing onto the rocky pile at the bottom of the pit. The impact was hard, and Seiler immediately felt the sharp pain of a broken arm, along with the possibility of a back injury. Alone in the dark, deep inside the earth, his mind raced as he tried to understand his condition and what had just happened. Above, Kent Birchfield and the third caver were unaware of the accident until they noticed the rope hanging loose, with no tension indicating Seiler was still on it. Realizing something had gone terribly wrong, Birchfield quickly lowered more rope, securing it before beginning his own descent into the unknown. As he reached Seiler, he found him in a state of shock, clutching his injured arm. Birchfield's first priority was to assess the injuries. The broken arm was evident, but the possible back injuries were more concerning, given the remoteness of their location and the difficulty of the rescue that lay ahead. Meanwhile, the third caver knew they needed help quickly. He made the hard decision to leave the others behind and ran down the mountainside to find assistance. The steep ground, combined with the urgency of the situation, made for a difficult journey, but he finally reached a place where he could call for help. The first call went out to cavers in Birmingham, about 150 miles away. The message was clear. There had been an accident in Valhalla Cave, and they needed all the help they could get. As the hours passed, news spread, and a rescue operation began to take shape. The Huntsville Police Department and the Madison County Rescue Squad were notified and began coordinating with local cavers who knew the cave system well. However, the response was anything but smooth. There was confusion about who to contact, and the dispatcher had lost the list of local cavers who could assist. Despite these setbacks, a group of skilled cavers and rescue personnel was finally assembled, and they set out for Valhalla Cave. By the time the rescue team arrived at the site around 5 p.m., the scene was chaotic. The narrow road leading up the mountain was clogged with police cars and private vehicles, forcing the rescuers to hike the final 2 miles to the cave. The sun was beginning to set, casting long shadows over the rugged landscape, and the urgency of the situation was clear. At the cave entrance, the team quickly assessed the situation and devised a plan. They rigged 3 separate lines, one to raise Seiler to the surface, and 2 others for rescuers to use as they descended and ascended alongside him. The excess manpower, including police and curious locals, was put to work planning the evacuation down the mountainside, keeping them away from the edge of the dangerous pit. As darkness fell, the rescuers reached Seiler at the bottom of the pit. They carefully splinted his broken wrist and wrapped him in a space blanket to prevent hypothermia, which could set in quickly in the cool, damp cave. A mild sedative was administered to help calm him and ease the pain. Once he was secured in a basket litter, the team began the careful task of lifting him to the surface. The lift was a tense process, but it went smoothly. Seiler, still in pain but now stabilized, was slowly brought up the 227-foot drop, with rescuers on either side to ensure his safety. By 8 p.m., he was finally out of the cave, back on solid ground. The team worked efficiently, and within another 2.5 hours, Seiler was transported to a hospital where he received further medical attention. In the aftermath of the rescue, the cavers thought about what had gone wrong. Seiler later said that he had misjudged the depth due to the fog at the bottom of the pit, a small but crucial mistake that almost cost him his life. The group realized that a simple knot at the end of the rope could have prevented the accident, ensuring that no one would rappel off the end. It was a sobering reminder of the risks involved in caving and the importance of meticulous planning and safety measures. The rescue also taught people important things. There was confusion about who to call, and it took a long time to get the right people to the place. This showed that there needs to be better planning and communication in these situations. In the future, these lessons will help people respond better to similar accidents so that cavers in trouble can be helped more quickly and effectively. For people who like to explore caves, the story of Valhalla Cave on September 3, 1977 was a reminder that it can be dangerous. While many people like to go deep into the earth, it is important to be careful and respect nature. The story of William Seiler and how he was saved is now a famous story in the caving world. It shows the risks and the friendships that are part of this exciting but also challenging activity. Two friends entered Bronson Cave on a rainy Monday morning. What began as an exciting exploration soon turned into a nightmare. As the water levels inside the cave started rising, the current became too strong to fight. Trapped deep underground, separated by rushing water, one of them was swept away, and the other clung to a ledge, fighting for his life. Rescuers faced nearly impossible conditions to reach them. What happened next is a story of struggle to stay alive. Donaldson Cave, also known as Bronson or Shawnee Cave, is a fascinating underground system located in Spring Mill State Park, Indiana. Managed by the Indiana Department of Natural Resources, this cave is part of a larger network of caves and streams that span over 8,000 feet in length. The water flowing through Donaldson Caves comes from a stream that originates southeast of the park and flows through Twin Caves and Bronson Cave before reaching this impressive destination. Access to the cave begins at the Bronson Cave entrance and ends at the Donaldson entrance. The cave's passages are usually ankle to knee-deep in water, but in some sections you will need to swim or float. For safety, it's best to visit when the weather is dry, as the cave can flood during high rainfall or rapid snowmelt. To enhance safety during exploration, it's recommended to wear a personal flotation device, also known as a PFD. Visitors can enjoy a scenic hike to the entrance of Donaldson Cave, which sits beautifully on a shaded hillside, with cool water flowing from the cave into the stream below. Though the cave itself is an adventurous experience, the surrounding park offers plenty of amenities for those looking to make a day trip. Spring Mill State Park includes hiking trails, camping, boating, fishing, and attractions like the Pioneer Village, Virgil Grissom Memorial, and a nature center. To explore Donaldson Cave, visitors must enter through the park's main gate, and a gate fee may be required. Planning ahead is essential. It is ideal to park at the Donaldson Cave lot and then have so-called afterclothes ready. A second vehicle for a shuttle is suggested to avoid a long hike to the Bronson entrance via Trail 3. For those unable to enter the cave, the stunning views and nearby activities make this location a great adventure above ground as well. In 1985, on the morning of Monday, July 1st, two young men, Michael Hall, age 25, and Roman Lazowski, 24, arrived at Bronson Cave in Spring Mill State Park near Bloomington, Indiana. The weather was far from ideal. It had rained steadily through the night, and the rain continued as they prepared to enter the cave. Despite the conditions, their enthusiasm for caving was undeterred. Lazowski had explored Bronson Cave before, and his familiarity with the cave gave them some confidence. However, their preparation was minimal, dressed in nothing more than shorts and tennis shoes, and armed with simple flashlights. Their plan was to follow the underground stream from Bronson Cave, a known inlet, all the way to the Donaldson Cave entrance, where the water exits. The cave system is famous for its winding passages and beautiful rock formations, but it also presents significant challenges. The rain made the cave environment even more unpredictable, raising the risk of flash floods and slippery terrain. The cave's climate was cold, with temperatures around 54 degrees Fahrenheit, and the rain had caused the stream to swell, making the cave more dangerous than usual. As they stepped into the cave, the air felt damp, and the sound of rushing water echoed through the narrow passages. Despite the conditions, Michael and Roman were driven by a deep thirst for exploration. The sense of adventure and the unknown drew them in, even though their gear was not suited for the potentially dangerous environment. For them, the thrill of discovery outweighed the risks. But the cave, especially in such wet conditions, was not forgiving. Their decision to enter during a rainstorm would soon prove to be a dangerous one, as the cave's stream was flooded, posing a significant threat to their safety. About halfway through their trek, the stream became more intense, forming waist-deep rapids. Excited at first, the two cavers, quote-unquote, rode the rapids for a few minutes, enjoying the rush of adrenaline. But their thrill quickly turned to fear when they encountered an enormous set of rapids. This time, the force of the water was too powerful to control. Realizing the danger, Hall and Lazowski attempted to turn back, but the sheer force of the current made it impossible. They were trapped. With no choice but to continue downstream, they pressed on. Almost immediately, the water overcame them. Lazowski was swept away, but he managed to grab onto a ledge, pulling himself out of the raging current. He called out to Hall, hoping his friend could make it to safety. Hall, seeing no other option, jumped into the water, but the current was too strong. He was swept past Lazowski, his body battered against the cave walls. Lazowski watched helplessly as Hall's flashlight stuck up out of the water while his friend disappeared beneath the surface. They were lucky because they were only about 300 feet from the Donaldson cave entrance. After being pushed around by the water for about 30 seconds, Hall was washed out into the daylight. He was breathing heavily, grabbed a railing near the cave's exit, and pulled himself to safety. He was tired and hurt, but he found his shorts, which had been ripped off by the force of the water, and he went to get help. At the hospital, Hall was treated for cuts, bruises, and a chipped elbow, but he was alive. Lazowski, however, was still trapped inside the cave. Believing that his friend had drowned, he decided to stay put, knowing that it would be too dangerous to continue through the cave alone. Using his survival training from his time in the Marines, he found a small crevice above the water and perched on a 6-inch ledge. For 55 hours, Lazowski fought to survive in the cold, wet cave. He constantly had to shift his body to stay on the narrow ledge, using his elbows, knees, and head to keep from slipping into the water below. The cave's cold temperature, combined with the damp air and constant sound of rushing water, made the situation even more challenging. He shouted for help occasionally, but was afraid to fall asleep, fearing that he might slip into the water or miss a potential rescuer. Outside the cave, rescue efforts were underway. When Hall came out from the cave, emergency crews knew that Lazowski was likely still alive and trapped somewhere near the Donaldson cave entrance. However, the heavy rainfall had caused the water levels inside the cave to rise, making any rescue attempts extremely difficult. A canine unit was brought in to search downstream in case Lazowski had been swept out without being seen, but no trace of him was found. Rescue teams of experienced cavers, emergency service personnel, and volunteers gathered to help. The conditions inside the cave were dangerous, with the high water and rapid flow making progress almost impossible. On Monday night, a group of rescuers wearing wetsuits entered Bronson Cave but could only make it 600 to 800 feet before being forced to turn back. The water was simply too strong. Early Tuesday morning, another team entered Donaldson Cave from the opposite direction, hoping to reach Lazowski from upstream. However, they were stopped just 100 feet in, where the ceiling dropped almost to water level, leaving no way to pass. The rescuers then tried to dig into Donaldson Cave from an adjacent cave, but this too proved unsuccessful. Finally, they managed to drill into the cave passage from above, hoping to create a direct route to Lazowski. In the early morning of Wednesday, as a rescue team worked near the low ceiling of Donaldson Cave, a light shone through the darkness, revealing Lazowski's location. The mission to recover his body turned into a rescue operation. Rescuers told him to stay calm and conserve his energy as the water was still too high for them to reach him. Using a bullhorn, they maintained voiced contact to keep his spirits up. By around 5 p.m. that day, Steve Collins, one of the rescuers, was able to squeeze through the low ceiling and reach Lazowski. Collins was on the other side of the stream from Lazowski, but a rope was quickly brought up. Collins threw one end of the rope to Lazowski, who, even though he was very tired, tied it to a rock on his side. As rescuers pulled Lazowski across the stream, the rock on the near side of the cave fell, causing both men to be swept away by the current. Luckily, Collins was caught by an attachment on the far side, while Lazowski was grabbed by rescuers waiting downstream. Lazowski was given a wetsuit top and helmet to protect him from the cold, and was carefully hauled up the crevice above the stream. He was then passed along a Tyrolean traverse, a type of rope system used to move people across dangerous terrain, and finally brought to safety at the cave entrance around 8 p.m. After spending 55 hours trapped in the cave, Lazowski was taken to the hospital, where he was treated for hypothermia and dehydration. Despite the terrifying ordeal, he suffered only minor cuts and bruises, a testament to his determination and survival skills. The key lesson from Roman Lazowski's survival is simple but powerful. He survived because he refused to give up. Trapped in the cold, dark cave for 55 hours without food or water and constantly at risk of hypothermia, Lazowski endured conditions that should have overwhelmed him. His body was chilled from the moment he entered the cave, and the cold, damp air constantly sapped his strength. From a physical standpoint, it seemed almost impossible for him to last that long. But survival is not just about the body. It's about the mind and the will to keep fighting. Lazowski lived because he made the decision to survive. Throughout his time in the cave, Lazowski's determination never wavered. He fought to stay mentally sharp, telling himself over and over, "I can't let this cave beat me." With nothing but his own thoughts to occupy him, he found ways to distract himself from the overwhelming fear and cold. At one point, he even began to hallucinate, imagining a conversation with an invisible companion. Together, they discussed the NBA draft picks from New York and Indiana, which helped Lazowski keep his mind engaged and focused. When his leg fell asleep from sitting on the narrow ledge for so long, he pounded on it until the feeling returned. Every time he felt himself drifting off to sleep, he woke himself up by screaming for help, terrified of missing a potential rescue. Lazowski's story is a powerful reminder that survival is not only about knowing what to do in dangerous situations, it's about having the determination to persevere, even when all the odds are against you. His mental strength, combined with his survival instincts, helped him endure one of the most terrifying experiences of his life. Even when his body was at its weakest, his mind remained strong, and that ultimately saved him. Lazowski's incredible resilience in the face of such overwhelming adversity serves as a testament to the power of the human spirit to endure, even in the most desperate situations. If you've enjoyed this story, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more thrilling cave exploration and survival stories. Let us know in the comments what you think about this incredible rescue, and stay tuned for our next adventure. Thank you for watching, and remember, whether above ground or below, always stay safe and be prepared for the unexpected. Deep within the dark, twisting passages of Nielson's cave, two experienced cavers embarked on a routine exploration. As they descended into the abyss, navigating narrow shafts and enormous chambers, everything seemed to be going according to plan, until one small mistake turned their adventure into a nightmare. In the heart of the cave, something went terribly wrong, and one of the cavers found himself in a life-threatening situation, with only the cold, unforgiving darkness around them. What happened next in the depths? Watch to uncover the gripping story of Nielson's cave exploration. Nielson's Well is a fascinating and challenging cave located in Utah, known for its impressive depth and unique features. The cave is a vertical shaft that plunges 315 feet deep into the earth, leading to a massive room at the bottom. This room is extraordinary in size, measuring approximately 120 feet wide, 170 feet long, and 80 feet high. The sheer scale of this chamber creates an environment where sound behaves in unusual ways. Communication within the cave, especially between people in the large room and those up the shaft, is particularly difficult. Whether you're using your voice or a whistle, the sound tends to fill the entire room rather than traveling upward or downward, making it nearly impossible to direct a clear message through the shaft. Nielson's Well is not just any cave. It has a rich history of exploration and mapping. From 1986 to 1988, a dedicated team of explorers, including Ken Stawley, Jim Nichols, Mike Beer, and Rodney D. Horrocks, undertook the challenging task of discovering and mapping this cave. Over 2 years, they meticulously explored the cave's depths, documenting its intricate passages and vast chambers. Their efforts helped to bring the cave into the spotlight, making it one of the more well-known and studied caves in Utah. Despite its relative discovery, Nielson's Well remains a cave that requires skill and experience to navigate. The combination of its deep shaft and the vast, echoing chamber at the bottom creates an environment that challenges even seasoned cavers. Whether you're a caving enthusiast or just someone fascinated by the underground world, Nielson's Well offers a glimpse into the wonders hidden beneath the Earth's surface. The cave's unique acoustic properties and impressive scale make it a remarkable destination for exploration and adventure. On October 17, 2020, a 25-year-old caver named Jason Wayland, along with a fellow caver, embarked on an exciting and challenging exploration of Nielson's Cave in Utah. The duo had planned a full day of adventure starting early in the morning at 9:30 a.m. Their goal for the day was to bolt new pitches and inspect some of the domes within the cave for potential climbing routes. With their gear packed and their minds focused on the task ahead, they descended into the cave's depths, eager to explore what lay below. Nielson's Cave is not an ordinary cave. It is known for its deep, vertical shafts and complex passages. After descending the impressive 317-foot entrance pit, Jason and his partner navigated through several smaller obstacles and additional pits. They were determined to reach a significant area within the cave known as Fantasy Well, which is a massive 300-feet pit that requires careful preparation and skilled rigging to explore safely. The upper sections of Nielson's Cave had been rigged with ropes from a previous expedition, which made their initial descent easier. However, when they reached the top of Fantasy Well, they found that the rope for this deep pit had only been attached to the anchor but not properly rigged for descent. This presented a new challenge for Jason, who took on the responsibility of rigging the rope correctly. Before starting the descent, Jason made sure everything was in place. He attached the rope bag, which contained the rest of the rope needed for the descent, to his harness. This smart way of preparing the rope made it easy to come out of the bag as he went down, so he didn't have to deal with the heavy weight of the rope all at once. Jason and his partner's thirst for exploration and adventure drove them to meticulously prepare for this trip. They knew the risks involved in caving and took the time to ensure that all their equipment was in proper working order. As Jason Wayland was descending Fantasy Well deep within Nielson's Cave, he was focused on his progress down the 300-feet pit. About halfway down, he realized something alarming. There were no grommets in the rope bag, which meant that he couldn't see if the end of the rope was properly secured with a stopper knot. A stopper knot is crucial in caving because it prevents the rope from slipping through the descender, a device that controls the descent. Realizing the potential danger, Jason shouted up to his companion, who had packed the rope bag earlier, to confirm whether the rope had a stopper knot at the end. His companion, who was still at the top of the pit, yelled back down, reassuring Jason that the knot was in place. Trusting his partner's word, Jason continued his descent. He was about 40 feet from the bottom of the pit when, suddenly, without warning, the rope slipped through his braking hand and then through his descender. In an instant, Jason lost control and fell down 20 feet, hitting a sloped shelf. The impact didn't stop his fall. He tumbled another 20 feet, landing hard at the bottom of the pit, a total of 40 feet below the surface. The fall was brutal. Jason was immediately overwhelmed by intense pain, especially in his right foot and right hand. His headlamp, which was essential for seeing in the pitch-black cave, was knocked off his helmet during the fall, plunging him into darkness. Despite the agony coursing through his body, Jason knew he had to act quickly. He forced himself to stand up, wincing with every move, and began to carefully make his way toward his headlamp. Each step was a battle, with sharp pain stabbing through his right foot, but he knew he couldn't stay in the darkness at the bottom of that pit. When he finally reached his headlamp and managed to put it back on, Jason took a moment to assess his situation. The pain was severe, but he could still move, which was a good sign. Meanwhile, his companion, who had heard the commotion, quickly pulled the rope back up to the top and attached another rope to the end. This allowed him to descend safely to Jason's side. As fate would have it, Jason's companion was not only a fellow caver, but also a medical doctor. Once he reached Jason at the bottom of the pit, he immediately conducted a thorough examination, checking Jason from head to toe for injuries. Despite the intense pain Jason felt, the doctor confirmed that he had not suffered any broken bones, concussions, or other major trauma. This was a huge relief, as falling from such a height in a cave could have easily resulted in much more serious injuries, or even worse. Jason's survival after such a fall was nothing short of miraculous. After the painful fall at the bottom of Fantasy Well, Jason Wayland knew he was in a bad situation. He wasn't sure if his injuries would let him climb back up the rope to safety, but there was no other choice. He had to try. With courage, Jason decided to test himself and see if he could manage even a few feet of climbing. He slowly attached himself to the rope and started to go up, preparing himself for the worst. To his surprise and relief, the climbing technique he was using, known as frogging, didn't seem to hurt his injuries, even though his foot loops were on his injured right foot. This gave Jason a huge sense of relief. He felt a new sense of hope that he might just be able to get out of the cave after all. Jason was also thrilled to realize that he could still use his ponton, a specialized foot ascender that helps cavers climb ropes more efficiently. This piece of equipment would make the ascent easier, especially given his condition. With his fellow caver offering to carry his bag out of the cave, Jason started the long and painful climb up Fantasy Well. Every inch he ascended brought him closer to safety, but it also demanded every ounce of strength and determination he had left. As Jason slowly made his way up, he knew that getting out of Fantasy Well was just the first hurdle. Once he reached the top of the pit, he still had to cross the large room that led to the entrance rope. This room, the big room, was one of the most challenging parts of the cave. It was about the size of a football field, filled with large breakdowns and shifting boulders. For an injured caver, this was a nightmare. Jason knew this crossing would be excruciatingly painful. Sure enough, as he began to make his way across the big room, the pain in his injured foot flared up intensely. Each step was painful and difficult for him, as he had to carefully navigate the uneven and treacherous terrain. The large rocks and shifting boulders made every move dangerous and unpredictable. But Jason pushed through the pain, knowing that the entrance rope and ultimately the surface was just on the other side. It took all of Jason's willpower to cross that room. Every step was a battle against the pain and exhaustion, but after what felt like an eternity, he finally reached the entrance rope. The final ascent out of the cave was incredibly challenging, but Jason's determination kept him going. After 4 long hours in the cave, Jason and his companion finally emerged from the darkness at 1:30 in the afternoon. The fresh air and daylight were a welcome relief after the ordeal they had just endured, but the challenges weren't over yet. After exiting the cave, Jason still had a 3-mile hike back to the trailhead. Despite his injuries, he insisted on carrying his own pack, refusing to let his companion take on that burden. The hike was grueling, with every step sending sharp pain through his injured foot and hand, but Jason kept going, determined to make it back without anyone's help. When they finally reached the trailhead, Jason knew he needed to get medical attention. He went to a hospital where x-rays were taken. To his relief, the x-rays showed no definite fractures, but he was diagnosed with a severe sprain to his right ankle, along with sprains to his right thumb, left foot, and left wrist. It was a painful and serious injury, but given the circumstances, it could have been much worse. Jason Wayland, a seasoned caver, learned a hard but important lesson from his experience in Fantasy Well. He now emphasizes the critical importance of always checking for a stopper knot before descending on a rope, especially when that rope has already been rigged or stashed in a bag. No matter how much trust you place in your fellow cavers, it is crucial to take that extra step to ensure your safety. Even if someone assures you that they have tied the knot, it's worth the effort to verify it yourself. This small precaution could make the difference between a safe descent and a potentially life-threatening fall. In Jason's case, the rope he used had been employed in fantasy well in the past, so it was surprising when it suddenly turned out to be 40 feet too short. The mystery was solved when they realized that previous riggings of the pit had used 2 ropes, a shorter one for the initial rappel onto a ledge, and a longer one for the free-hang descent to the bottom. On this particular day, Jason's companion had removed these ropes for cleaning and inspection. When they returned to the cave, his companion mistakenly supplied Jason with only the second rope, forgetting that an additional 40 feet rope was usually used for the first section. The absence of this rope, coupled with the lack of a stopper knot, led to Jason's dangerous fall. This accident shows the dangers that can happen from making assumptions and not noticing important details in caving. Jason's experience, and similar accidents that have happened, some with deadly results, are warning signs to always be careful. For anyone planning to rappel using a rope from a bag, it is important to either pack your own rope or carefully check the rope, making sure the end is knotted. Some cavers like to run the rope through a grommet at the bottom of the bag so that the knot is still visible, even when the bag is full. Others suggest tying 2 stopper knots, one about 6 feet from the end and another near the very end, so that if the first knot is missed, there's still time to find the second one and make necessary changes. In the world of caving, where every detail matters, these precautions can prevent serious accidents and save lives. Jason's ordeal serves as a powerful reminder that even experienced cavers can face unexpected dangers, but with the right precautions, many of these risks can be mitigated. As we bring this incredible yet cautionary tale to a close, remember that even the most experienced adventurers can find themselves in challenging situations. Caving is a thrilling and rewarding activity, but it comes with its own set of risks. Always double-check your equipment, never take shortcuts, and stay vigilant in every step you take. The Lost River Cave sounds like a place from an Indiana Jones movie. It also looks like one. Let's face it, there aren't a whole lot of caves on this planet that you can explore on a boat, or that have been featured by Ripley's Believe It or Not. It's a unique place great for families to visit, but it also boasts a dramatic history and, on rare occasions, has even turned deadly. Lost River Cave is located in Bowling Green, Kentucky. Bowling Green is the 3rd largest city in Kentucky, but the nearest big city to it is actually Nashville, Tennessee, since Bowling Green sits quite close to Kentucky's southern border. Aside from this cave, the biggest thing Bowling Green is probably known for is the National Corvette Museum. It's not really a place that draws millions of visitors every tourist season. The existence of Lost River Cave within its city limits is something of an anomaly. Most cities don't get to have such an unusual natural landmark just a few minutes away from the local shopping mall. The entrance to Lost River Cave, which is literally across the street from a Popeye's chicken restaurant, is among the largest cave entrances in the eastern United States. The cave itself is really a cave system, which stretches out for 7 miles underground. As the name suggests, the cave has a fairly wide river running through it. For a long time, the river was also thought to be insanely deep. When geologists first began trying to measure the depth of the water, they used something called a plumb bob, a small, pointed weight on the end of a string. Although I haven't read any direct accounts of this, there's a good chance that the first time they tried it, they ran out of string. They didn't need just a few feet of it, or even just a few dozen feet of it. To their surprise, geologists ended up needing hundreds of feet of string to measure the depth of the Lost River. After some adjustments to their string supply, they finally managed to get the plumb bob to hit what they thought was the bottom of the river, at an astonishing 437 feet below the surface. They were measuring at a section called the Blue Hole. Blue holes are essentially sinkholes, and they appear in other places around the world, such as the Bahamas and the South China Sea. The fact that there was a blue hole inside a cave in the middle of the US that appeared to be nearly 450 feet deep helped catapult Lost River Cave to international fame. In fact, this extraordinary depth was the main reason why Lost River Cave ended up being featured in Ripley's Believe It or Not. But, disappointingly, readers should have chosen not to believe this one. It was later discovered that these insane measurements were wildly inaccurate. but they were wildly inaccurate for an interesting reason. The blue hole in Lost River Cave actually connects to another river, one that runs underground, so technically the blue hole is only 16 feet deep. The Plum Bob was just getting swept underground, making it seem like it kept descending and descending. This was a clever trick by Lost River Cave. No one seemed to figure it out until long after it had become a famous tourist destination, and many are still on the fence about the true depth. This apparently includes the government of Kentucky, whose Energy and Environment Cabinet still says on its website that the blue hole's depth is supposedly 437 feet. No matter how deep it is, the blue hole is still an amazing feature of the cave, and it's not the only reason the cave is an amazing place to visit. Today, on a boat, it takes roughly a half hour to tour the whole cave, because that's how much there is to see and explore inside. The cave also has a fascinating history to learn about. People were storing food and using the cave for shelter as long as 10,000 years ago. Around the turn of the 19th century, a water mill was built here, and, for a long time, it was the only underground water mill in the United States. During the Civil War, Bowling Green was Kentucky's provisional capital as part of the Confederacy. During the Union Army takeover, Union soldiers used the cave as a camp, as many as 40,000 of them. According to local archaeologists, you can still see the names of Union soldiers carved into the walls. My favorite part of the Lost River Cave story is what happened during Prohibition. According to local legend, although this has never been proven, the cave was used by bootleggers to make alcohol illegally. After Prohibition, and this part we know for sure, the cave was turned into a nightclub. Yeah, no joke, a nightclub. The club hosted a number of famous musical acts, including the NBC Orchestra. Billboard described it as the only air-conditioned nightclub at the time because it was so naturally cool inside. For reasons that could only have to do with the general public being no fun, the club went out of style and closed in the 1960s. The cave went into a period of decline, filling with trash. It wasn't until the 1990s that an effort was made to refurbish the cave and open it for tourism. Paying to take a boat tour is generally the way most people experience Lost River Cave today. However, there are those who try and explore the cave alone. You're not supposed to do this. The property is privately owned, so you have to avoid getting caught just to get inside. Despite the obvious intrigue, I, of course, cannot recommend that anybody try this. Not only is it dangerous, it's also illegal. But I can tell you the story of what happened when one man tried to do it. His name was Danny L. Vaughn Jr. Danny grew up in Warren County, the same county where Bowling Green is. He was born in 1990 and spent 30 years of his life living near Lost River Cave before he seemingly decided enough was enough. He was going to try and explore the cave. I say this in speculation. As far as I've been able to uncover, nobody really knows for sure what Danny's motivation was. Danny reached the age of 30 during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic. Stores were closed, families were forced to stay home. Needless to say, tours of Lost River Cave were canceled indefinitely, and there was no way, at least no legal way, to get in. Danny had a daughter. He also had a decent-sized family full of siblings, aunts, uncles, grandparents, and cousins. There's no real way to know, but I think we can safely assume Danny's experience of COVID-19 was much like it was for most people. Stressful, tragic, highly disruptive, and after a while, full of boredom and restlessness. I guarantee you, Danny L. Vaughn Jr. is not the only person in Warren County who thought about sneaking into Lost River Cave during lockdown. What sets Danny apart is that it appears he went out and actually tried to do it. As I described earlier, one of the many things that makes Lost River Cave unique is its central location. As a matter of fact, it is right off the side of the highway. This poses both advantages and disadvantages for sneaking in. For a massive cave with a 7-mile river inside it, the place is remarkably easy to get to. You could even stop across the highway at Lost River Liquors and grab some beer on your way in. Being right next to the highway is also pretty ideal for making a quick getaway if needed. At the same time, being in such a central location means there are people around most of the time. Of course, due to COVID, there were no tours happening and the cave itself was empty, but the whole surrounding area wasn't. Danny may have planned meticulously for this, or he may have had no plan at all. None of us really have any idea. All we know is that there was at least one witness to the event. At around 6:30 p.m. on March 11, 2020, Danny L. Vaughn Jr. was seen climbing over the fence and entering Lost River Cave. The witness who saw him called the police immediately. Why they were so quick to call the authorities must have one of two possible explanations. The first is that the person called because they saw Danny fall into the water. This would explain why they were so quick to dial 911. They thought he had an accident and was probably hurt. The second explanation is that the person who called was simply calling because he was trespassing and they wanted to report it. This begs the question of whether Danny fell or not. Frustratingly, local news reports seem to conflict on this. The local NBC station reported that officials on the scene said Danny jumped over the fence and fell into the river. But the local ABC station quoted an officer named Tim Gray, who said, "We don't know if the individual jumped or fell from the fence, but we are aware of witnesses who did see him climb over the fence and did not see him resurface." Well, which is it? I've never been to Lost River Cave, but based on the multitude of photographs and video footage available online, I have not seen anything I would describe as a fence. There are certain sections inside the cave where there are railings, low metal beams along the river's edge. But there doesn't appear to be a fence that a witness from outside the cave could see Danny climbing over. But in May 2020, there might have been a temporary fence blocking entry to the cave, which had been shut down due to COVID just a month earlier. If I had to guess, that's probably what Danny climbed over and what the witness reported to the police. If that's true, it means Danny most likely didn't fall. He was just obviously sneaking in. What Danny got up to while he was in there is something we'll never know. The sad and mysterious ending to the story is that he somehow drowned in the river. If you frame the story like it was a madman who leapt over the fence, fell, and drowned, well, then it doesn't sound so peculiar. But if you dig a little deeper, as I think you and I have, we see that it probably wasn't that simple. Danny probably didn't fall. And if he had fallen, he wouldn't have landed in the water, because he was probably climbing over a temporary fence that was blocking the opening of the cave, which is a bit of a distance from where the river actually sits. But how did Danny drown? Most of the river is only 4 or 5 feet deep. Sure, it's supposedly possible to drown in an inch of water, but if you're a full-grown male with enough physical agility to leap over a fence, how likely is it that, sadly, like so many cases, with this, we simply don't have enough information? It's possible no one does. Besides the witness who called the police, and according to Officer Gray only saw him until he passed over the fence, no one saw Danny again until his body was recovered from the water. Was he a thrill seeker looking for an escape amid the stress and confinement imposed by COVID restrictions? Was he suffering a nervous breakdown? Did he somehow fall or hurt himself in the water in such a way that he couldn't swim or even stand up in the shallow river? Deep within the mountains of North Georgia lies a dangerous cave that only the bravest dare to enter. For a group of young, excited cavers, what started as an adventure quickly turned into a terrifying ordeal. As they descended into the darkness, something went horribly wrong, leaving one of them trapped in a deadly situation. What happened next is a story of bravery, quick thinking, and the unpredictable dangers that lurk in the depths of Ellison's cave. The mountains of North Georgia are one of the most beloved landscapes in the American South. However, hidden beneath this rugged terrain is a lesser-known natural wonder caves. Georgia has more than 500 caves, most of which are located in its northern mountainous region. Among these, Ellison's cave stands out as the deepest and most intimidating of them all. Located on Pigeon Mountain, in the remote Crockford Pigeon Mountain Wildlife Management Area, Ellison's cave is a true challenge for even the most experienced cavers. To reach Ellison's cave, you must journey deep into rural territory, with dirt roads winding through Georgia pines and thick shrubbery. After a considerable hike, you arrive at the cave's entrance, more than 2,600 feet above sea level. This cave is not just any cave, it's one of the largest in the United States, stretching nearly 12 miles long and plunging over 1,063 feet deep. Ellison's cave is famous for containing the 2 deepest cave drops in the country, aptly named Fantastic and Incredible. These vertical shafts descend 586 feet and 440 feet, respectively, making them a magnet for thrill seekers. The most daunting of these is Fantastic, the deepest cave drop in the continental U.S. Imagine a tunnel so deep that if the Seattle Space Needle were placed at the bottom, only a few feet of its antenna would stick out above ground. Formed by the slow dissolution of limestone bedrock by acidic groundwater, Ellison's cave dates back to the Paleozoic age. In 1968, explorers discovered a unique geological feature inside the cave, a semi-active fault running along the cave floor. This fault, a lateral one that moves horizontally, has left behind grooves on the cave walls and piles of debris from the grinding of fault planes. Although the fault is still active, its movements have been too small to threaten the cave's structure. Ellison's cave, with its impressive drops and unique geological features, is a popular destination for hikers and cavers alike. However, as thrilling as it is, the cave is also dangerous. The excitement of cave exploration is powerful, drawing adventurous souls into the unknown depths beneath the earth. For a group of young cavers from the Florida State Cave Club, this pull was irresistible. These were not just any thrill seekers. They were passionate explorers who had joined the National Speleological Society, NSS, chapter to dive into the mysteries of caves. The group, made up of 8 friends, was driven by an unquenchable thirst for adventure and discovery. Each member had heard tales of the wonders and challenges of caving, and they were eager to experience it all for themselves. In August 1969, this group of enthusiastic cavers set their sights on Ellison's Cave, one of the most famous and challenging caves in the United States. Ellison's Cave is known for its deep pits and treacherous passages. For these young explorers, the cave represented the ultimate test of their skills and courage. Among the group were 2 particularly eager adventurers, Janice Thompson, just 19 years old, and her close friend Susan Scott, also 19. Both had been captivated by the idea of caving since they first joined the club. They had spent hours discussing the challenges they might face and how they would tackle them. For them, Ellison's Cave was not just a destination, it was a dream come true. On the day of the expedition, the group was buzzing with excitement as they made their way to the cave. After reaching the entrance, they prepared their gear and descended into the 125-foot warm-up pit, a deep vertical shaft that would serve as the starting point for their exploration. The descent was thrilling as they carefully made their way down into the darkness, their carbide lamps flickering in the shadows. Once at the bottom, the group began to explore the cave's intricate passages, marveling at the beauty and mystery of the underground world. But as they explored, they knew the real challenge lay ahead, the ascent back to the surface. Janice was the second to begin the climb back up the warm-up pit. She had been looking forward to this moment, excited to prove her abilities in the difficult conditions of the cave. However, as she began her ascent, she quickly ran into trouble. Her chest harness, an essential piece of gear for climbing, wasn't working correctly. Frustrated and unsure of what to do, she decided to descend back down to the bottom of the pit to reassess. As Janice tried to fix her harness, another member of the group successfully ascended the pit. Watching her friend reach the top gave Janice a renewed determination. She knew she had to try again. However, her situation was complicated by the fact that her carbide lamp was running low, and she didn't have an electric backup. Undeterred, she decided to climb in near darkness, relying on her determination and experience. But halfway up the pit, disaster struck. The prusik knots she was using to climb began to slip, a potentially deadly situation in such a vertical environment. Without secure knots, Janice risked falling back down the pit with little chance of survival. Desperate to fix the problem, she fumbled in the dark to replace one of the faulty knots with a spare she had in her pack. Meanwhile, Susan, still waiting at the bottom, realized that her friend was in serious trouble. She quickly tied additional knots and sent them up to Janice in a frantic attempt to help. Janice managed to re-rig the knots, but a new problem arose. She couldn't remove the ineffective chest knot because she couldn't shift her weight entirely onto the new knot. She was stuck halfway up a deep pit, in the dark, with no way to move up or down. The situation was becoming more dangerous by the minute. Seeing her friend's distress, Susan made a brave decision. She started climbing up the pit on a second rope that had been hung earlier. As she climbed, she was aware of the immense risk she was taking, but her only thought was to reach Janice and help her. When Susan finally reached her level, she realized that the only way to free Janice was to cut the faulty prusik sling. With her heart pounding, Susan carefully used the flame of her carbide lamp to burn through the knot that was trapping her friend. The flame flickered dangerously close to Janice's skin, and both girls knew that one wrong move could lead to disaster. But Susan's hands were steady, and after what felt like an eternity, the knot finally gave way. Janice was free, and the two friends continued their ascent together. They reached the top of the pit without further incident, exhausted but relieved. The ordeal in Ellison's cave left a lasting impression on the group. What started as an exciting adventure had quickly turned into a life-threatening situation. For Janice and Susan, the experience was a stark reminder of the dangers of cave exploration. The cave, with all its beauty and mystery, also held deadly risks that could turn an adventure into a nightmare in an instant. Despite the close call, the group's passion for caving remained. They understood that the challenges they faced were part of what made cave exploration so exhilarating. But they also knew that they had to respect the power of the cave and always be prepared for the unexpected. The story of Janice and Susan's harrowing experience in Ellison's cave would be shared among cavers for years to come, serving as both a cautionary tale and a testament to the courage and determination of those who dare to explore the world beneath our feet. In reflecting on the incident, Janice Thompson shared that her difficulties on the rope were mainly due to her lack of experience with vertical caving and her failure to properly test her equipment before the trip. Although she had done some rope work in the past, it was her first time using her own gear, and she hadn't practiced enough with it. This was also her first time descending a pit in a cave, which added to the challenges she faced. Janice made it clear that the other members of the group were experienced in vertical caving and that her troubles were a result of her own inexperience. Following the incident, Janice and her grotto took important steps to ensure safety in future trips. They started offering vertical caving instruction for new members, including supervised practice on ropes, safety-focused lectures, and thorough equipment checks before entering any cave. This experience taught them the importance of preparation and safety in caving. In late September, two groups of divers arrived at this beautiful Florida spring. One group was highly trained, equipped for the dark, winding caves below. The other, inexperienced and unprepared, ignored the warnings of the experienced divers. What started as a day of exploration soon turned into a desperate fight for survival as the waters grew murky and panic set in. But not everyone would make it out of the cave's deadly grip. What happened deep inside those underwater caverns? Stay with us to uncover the chilling details of this fateful dive. Little River Springs, located in natural North Florida, is one of the most beautiful natural sights in the area. When the water is calm and undisturbed, the smooth, curving flow of the spring as it runs toward the Suwannee River is breathtaking. Under ideal conditions, the water is so clear that it appears almost invisible. Visitors can stand on a limestone shelf near the entrance of the cave, just below the water's surface, and look directly over the cavern without getting more than their knees wet. The spring run, which is about 150 feet long, flows into the Suwannee River, making it a popular destination for various water activities such as swimming, snorkeling, canoeing, and kayaking. However, Little River Springs is especially famous for its underwater cave system, which stretches over 1,200 feet in length. This cave attracts divers from around the world who come to explore its depths. The constant 72-degree water temperature makes it a refreshing spot during the summer and a warm retreat in the cooler months. Surrounded by a 125-acre county park, Little River Springs offers more than just its inviting waters. There are walking trails for nature lovers and opportunities for wildlife viewing, including deer, squirrels, and a variety of birds. The area also provides picnic pavilions, portable restrooms, and a paved parking lot, ensuring that visitors can enjoy the beauty of the springs comfortably. The spring itself is shallow, usually ranging from 2 to 4 feet deep, depending on the water levels of the nearby Suwannee River. Water flows from 2 limestone openings, with the larger one leading to a cavern entrance at a depth of about 15 feet. This cave system extends nearly 1/4 mile and reaches depths of up to 100 feet. Except during times of high water or when stirred by swimmers, the water remains crystal clear, displaying a vibrant blue hue near the cave entrance. The bottom of the spring run is made of limestone and wet sand, and the surrounding banks are reinforced with rocks to prevent erosion. Little River Springs offers a unique opportunity to observe the contrast between the clear blue spring water and the dark tea-colored waters of the Suwannee River. With several shallow areas, it's also a family-friendly destination. Accessible picnic areas with grills, overlooks, and paved sidewalks make this a great spot for both relaxation and adventure. Whether you're looking to explore the depths of its cave system or simply enjoy the refreshing waters, Little River Springs has something for everyone. In late September, the calm waters of Little River Springs in Florida became the backdrop for a tragic and preventable accident. On the 22nd of September 1985, 2 groups of divers arrived at the spring that day, each with different levels of experience and preparation. The first group was NSS-certified cave divers, well-trained and equipped for the dangerous challenges of cave diving. The other group, however, was made up of open water divers who lacked the proper certification, equipment, and training for the perilous dive they were about to undertake. The spring, with its clear, inviting water and complex cave system, attracted divers from around the world. Little River Springs was known for its beauty, but also for the hidden dangers beneath the surface. The cave system stretched over 1,200 feet in length and had been the site of numerous accidents over the years. This wasn't a place for novice divers or those unprepared for the risks that cave diving presented. But the open water divers seemed unaware, or worse, unfazed by the warnings they received. The NSS-certified group had spent hours preparing for their dive. They were experienced explorers, familiar with the dangers that lurked within the underwater caves. Their equipment was in top condition, and they carried multiple lights, guidelines, and backup air supplies. They carefully planned their dive, ensuring they had a clear understanding of the cave layout and the air needed for a safe return. They knew the rule: never use more than 1/3 of your air supply to get into the cave, 1/3 to get out, and keep the final third as a reserve. This rule could mean the difference between life and death in the labyrinth of underwater passages. But on the other hand, the second group of divers seemed far less prepared. While their excitement for diving was clear, they were severely lacking in the knowledge and equipment necessary for cave exploration. 4 divers were trained for open water diving, which is quite different from cave diving, which required specialized training. They only had 1 light per person, no continuous guideline to lead them back out of the cave, and their air supply plan was non-existent. The NSS group, noticing the inadequate preparation of the other divers, tried to warn them. They explained the dangers of entering the caves without the right gear or training, but the warnings fell on deaf ears. The open water divers seemed confident, too confident, and laughed off the concerns of the more experienced group. It was a dangerous combination: excitement, overconfidence, and a lack of preparation. The NSS group completed their dive successfully, following the safety protocols they had trained for. They entered the cave system, explored the beauty of the underwater passages, and made their way back, carefully managing their air and following their guidelines. After the dive, they began decompressing in the shallow waters near the surface. As they rested, they watched the second group of divers enter the water. The 4 open water divers seemed excited, ready to explore the cave despite the earlier warnings. They disappeared beneath the surface, heading into the cave system. For a while, everything seemed fine. The NSS group continued their decompression, assuming that the other group would follow their own instincts and exit the cave safely. After some time, all 4 divers resurfaced. It seemed like their dive had gone smoothly, and they were now back in the safety of the open water. But instead of stopping there, 3 of the 4 decided to re-enter the cave for a second dive. They ignored the fact that they were already low on air. Perhaps they felt invincible after their first dive. Or maybe they were eager to push the limits further. Whatever the reason, they made the fateful decision to go back in. As the 3 divers ventured deeper into the cave, they reached an area known as Table Rock. It was here that the reality of their situation hit them. They were dangerously low on air. Their gauges were reading between 400 and 900 psi, far too little for a safe return to the surface. Panic began to set in. In the underwater darkness, they realized that their poorly thought-out dive had put them all in grave danger. Without a continuous guideline, and with only 1 light per diver, they had no clear path to follow back to safety. In the chaos, the divers made a desperate decision: every man for himself. Instead of sticking together and trying to navigate their way out as a group, they each swam in different directions, hoping to find the exit on their own. One of the divers, disoriented and panicked, swam up into a dome area, thinking it might be a way out. But he was wrong. The dome led nowhere, and in the confusion he became trapped. The other 2 divers managed to make their way to the end of the permanent guideline that led out of the cave. They pushed forward, the air running dangerously low. Meanwhile, one of the NSS divers, still decompressing in just 10 feet of water, noticed something unusual: an enormous silt cloud billowing through the cave system. The cloud had been stirred up by the panicked divers, who were thrashing about in their desperate attempt to escape. The silt made visibility nearly impossible, further complicating their situation. Of the 3 divers who had re-entered the cave, 2 managed to surface. One emerged with no air left in his tank, while the other had a mere 50 psi remaining. They had barely made it out alive. But it wasn't immediately clear that only 2 of the divers had exited. In the confusion of the silt cloud and the panicked retreat, no one knew for sure if all 3 had made it out. The victim group, however, knew that one of their own was still trapped inside. Without hesitation, one of the surviving divers grabbed the 4th man's tank and re-entered the cave to search for his friend. The visibility was almost non-existent, and the air was running low, but he was determined to find the missing diver. After what must have felt like an eternity, he came out of the cave, dragging the lifeless body of the 3rd diver with him. The tragic accident at Little River Springs could have been avoided. The victim group was not equipped for cave diving and had ignored the warnings given to them. They lacked basic safety gear, such as extra lights and a continuous guideline, and they didn't plan their air supply properly. Worse still, they had laughed off the advice of experienced cave divers who knew the risks all too well. Rescue teams arrived quickly after the accident, but it was too late. The 3rd diver had died from the dangers of the cave. His lack of training and equipment, combined with the panic and confusion underwater, had cost him his life. This tragic event served as a reminder of the dangers of cave diving and the importance of proper training. Cave diving is not the same as open water diving. The risks are far greater, and even the smallest mistake can lead to disaster. In the aftermath, many in the diving community called for stricter regulations around cave diving. Some suggested that cave training should be a mandatory part of a diver's certification, especially in areas like Florida where cave systems are common. Others, like Landis, proposed a no-light rule for open water divers, which would prevent them from entering caves beyond their ability and training. Hey everyone, today we're diving deep, literally, into a story that shook the entire world. We're talking about the Kursk submarine disaster, a tragedy that unfolded in the year 2000, hundreds of meters below the surface of the Barents Sea. Imagine this, a giant, powerful nuclear submarine, the pride of a nation's fleet, vanishes without a trace. It's there one moment, then suddenly, nothing but silence fills the ocean depths. But wait, the silence isn't complete. Faint Morse code signals tapped out from the abyss. A desperate plea for help from the crew trapped inside the mangled steel tomb. The world held its breath in terror as a daring rescue mission unfolded against impossible odds. For days, 118 sailors' lives were uncertain. It wasn't just a military problem, it was about people. Families held on to hope. Everyone watched nervously, and every second passing felt like a heavy hit in the stomach. But the truth is, the Kursk wasn't just any submarine, and the Barents Sea wasn't exactly a walk in the park. There were secrets, hidden dangers, and a race against time that would leave everyone questioning what truly happened in the icy depths. So, buckle up, because we're about to unravel the Kursk disaster, a story of bravery, sacrifice, and the fight for survival in the face of unimaginable peril. On the morning of August 12, 2000, the Kursk submarine was in the Barents Sea, taking part in a big Navy practice called Summer X. It was a special event because it was the first time in over 10 years that the Russian Navy had organized such a large practice, especially since the Soviet Union broke up. There were about 30 ships and 3 submarines involved. The Kursk submarine had recently been praised for its great work and had the best crew in the Northern Fleet. Even though it was just practice, the Kursk was loaded with a full set of regular weapons. It was one of the few submarines allowed to have weapons ready all the time. It had 18 RPK-6 Vodopad RPK-7 Veeder anti-submarine missiles and 24 P-700 Granite cruise missiles, which were meant to beat the best air defenses of enemy ships. Kursk had mythic standing. It was reputedly unsinkable, and it was claimed that it could survive even if a torpedo hit it directly. The outer hull was made of 8mm thick steel covered by up to 80mm of rubber, which made it hard for other submarines or ships to find it. The inner hull was made of strong 50mm thick steel. There was a gap of about 1 to 2 meters between the two hulls. The inside of the submarine was divided into 9 compartments that could be sealed off to keep water out. The submarine was huge, about as long as 2 jumbo jets. At 8:51 in the morning, Kursk asked if it could practice launching torpedoes and got the go-ahead. After waiting for a while, the crew in the torpedo room loaded the first practice torpedo, called Type 65 Kit, or Fat Girl, because of its size into the submarine's number 4 torpedo tube on the right side. The torpedo was 10.7 meters long and weighed 5 tons. At 11:29:34 in the morning, seismic detectors in Norway and other places worldwide felt a small earthquake, measuring 1.5 on the Richter scale. They pinpointed its location to 69°38'N, 37°19'E, northeast of Murmansk, around 250 kilometers from Norway and 80 kilometers from the Kola Peninsula. At 11:31:48, just over 2 minutes after the first event, there was a bigger explosion, measuring 4.2 on the Richter scale. It was about 250 times stronger than the first one. This explosion was felt across northern Europe and even reached as far as Alaska. The force of the blast was similar to 2-3 tons of TNT. The seismic data showed that the explosion happened at the same level as the seabed. Based on the location data, the submarine had moved around 400 meters from where the first explosion occurred. It sank to a depth of 108 meters and stayed there for a while. The crew on another submarine, the Karelia, heard the explosion, but their captain thought it was just part of the exercise. On the Pyotr Veliki, the crew felt their ship shake from the explosion sound underwater. They reported it to their headquarters, but no one took it seriously. When the scheduled time for Kursk to finish the torpedo practice passed without any communication, Admiral Vyacheslav Alexeyevich Popov, who was on the Pyotr Veliki, wasn't too worried at first. He knew that communication equipment often failed. They sent a helicopter to find Kursk, but it couldn't see the submarine on the surface, so they told Popov. The duty officer in charge of the Northern Fleet told Captain Alexander Teslenko, who led the search and rescue team, to get ready. They used an old ship called Mikhail Rudnitsky, which wasn't originally meant for rescue missions. Teslenko made sure the ship was ready to leave within an hour. The ship was stationed at the main Northern Fleet base in Severomorsk. It had special rescue equipment like deep submergence vehicles, diving bells, and cameras. But it couldn't handle rough seas and could only lower the rescue vessels when the water was calm. At 5 p.m., an Ilyushin Il-38 plane was sent out to look for Kursk, but they couldn't find it. By 6 p.m., more than 6 hours after the explosion, Kursk didn't check in as scheduled. The Northern Fleet got worried and tried to reach the submarine but couldn't. At 6:30 p.m., they started a search and rescue mission and sent more planes to find Kursk, but they still couldn't find it. Finally, at 10:30 p.m., the Northern Fleet declared an emergency and stopped the exercise. About 15 to 22 ships and around 3,000 sailors from the Northern Fleet joined the search. The Mikhail Rudnitsky ship left port at 12:30 a.m. At first, the Russian Navy didn't talk much about what happened. It wasn't until late Saturday night, about 9 hours after the submarine sank, that Admiral Popov decided to look for it. Even though the submarine had been missing for 12 hours, Popov only told the Kremlin. But Minister of Defense Sergeyev didn't tell Putin until 7 a.m. on Sunday morning. Sergeyev didn't think it was a good idea for Putin to go to the site of the accident. On Sunday, even though Popov knew the submarine was missing, he told reporters that the naval exercise went really well and everything was fine. On Sunday morning, August 13th, at the Vidyaevo naval base, rumors started spreading that something was wrong with Kursk's crew. The telephone operator was busy with lots of calls mentioning a troubled submarine. Word quickly spread because the base was small. Family members hoped it was just a communication issue since Kursk was considered unsinkable. The deputy base commander tried to reassure them, saying the officers were just hanging around, nothing serious. On the day of the explosion, U.S. officials learned about Kursk sinking even before the Kremlin was informed. When other countries like Britain, France, Germany, Israel, Italy, and Norway offered help, the United States also offered their deep submergence rescue vehicle, but Russia declined all foreign assistance. Minister of Defense Igor Sergeyev assured the American embassy that the rescue operation was going well. The Russian Navy even told the media that a rescue was about to happen. On Sunday, August 13th, Pyotr Veliki detected possible signs of Kursk on the seabed. The rescue ship Mikhail Rudnitsky arrived later and tried to anchor, mistaking a sound for an SOS signal. The AS-34 entered into water, which collided with Kursk at a depth of 100 meters. The AS-32 then entered the water, but couldn't find Kursk due to wrong directions. They thought they heard an SOS, but it turned out to be from marine life. The salvage tug Nikolai Chaiker arrived early, capturing images of Kursk's severe damage. Kursk was found listing at an angle, with its bow deeply embedded in the seabed. The AS-34 tried to attach to Kursk's escape trunk but failed due to battery issues and rough weather, leading to the suspension of rescue operations. The Russians announced on Monday, August 14th, that Kursk had faced minor technical difficulties and had descended to the ocean floor. They claimed to have made contact with the crew, supplying air and power, and assured that everyone on board is alive. The BBC reported that Kursk had grounded due to a breakdown during exercises, with rescue crews maintaining radio contact with surface vessels. Senior Russian Navy officers gave different explanations for the accident. Admiral Vladimir Kuroyedov suggested a serious collision, while Vice Premier Ilya Klebanov proposed the possibility of hitting an old mine from World War II. Klebanov also mentioned that most sailors might have died before the submarine sank. A commission chaired by Klebanov was convened 2 days after the incident, but it included mostly officials with vested interests, raising concerns about the impartiality of the investigation. The rescue teams faced challenges due to bad weather, including 3.7-meter, 12-feet waves, strong undersea currents, and poor visibility on Tuesday and Wednesday. Despite efforts, Mikhail Rudnitsky couldn't connect to the submarine using a diving bell, and attempts to use a remotely operated vehicle on the rescue hatch also failed. On Tuesday evening, AS-34 was launched again, but got damaged. It was repaired and relaunched the same night. On Tuesday, crane ship PK-7500 arrived with a better rescue vehicle, but bad weather prevented its launch. The team decided to launch it near the coast and tow it to the rescue site. On Wednesday, 16th August, AS-34 tried to attach to the submarine but failed. Its propulsion system got damaged during recovery. Repairs were made using parts from another vessel. PK-7500 tried to reach the submarine but faced difficulties due to the storm. On Thursday, Popov informed the Navy that no explosion caused the Kursk sinking, but suspected an external influence caused a leak. Attempts to reach the sub's aft area failed. The Russian DSRV couldn't attach due to a vacuum seal issue. The Altai ship also failed to attach a diving bell. Reports of hearing SOS signals from within the sub were later doubted. Rescue divers didn't tap on the hull to signal survivors, despite some evidence suggesting otherwise. Fragments of both hulls, including a 5-ton piece of the nose, indicated a significant explosion in the torpedo room. Private and state-owned Russian media criticized the Navy's refusal of international help. 5 days after the accident, President Putin accepted British and Norwegian assistance. British and Norwegian divers arrived on Friday, 18th August. The Russian 328th Expeditionary Rescue Squad and divers were also involved. On 19th August, the Norwegian ship Normand Pioneer brought the British rescue submarine LR-5, arriving 7 days after the disaster. On Sunday, 20th August, Norwegian divers lowered an ROV to the submarine, finding the first 18 meters, 59 feet, twisted and full of debris. Russian Navy officials limited Norwegian divers to work on the stern, causing protests from the divers who felt it stopped rescue efforts. When the divers tried to open the air control valve, it wouldn't budge. Russian experts advised them to turn it anti-clockwise, but the divers found success by turning it clockwise. They then attempted to open the hatch using the ROV's arms, finally succeeding on Monday, 21st August, to find the trunk flooded. Using custom tool, they opened the internal hatch, releasing air from the 9th compartment and revealing bodies inside. Norwegian divers were tasked with cutting holes in the hull, while Russian divers entered the submarine. They cut a hole in the 8th compartment using a high-pressure cutting machine. Russian divers then entered the wreck and opened a bulkhead hatch to compartment 9. Inside compartment 9, the divers faced poor visibility due to dust and ash. Despite the challenging conditions, Warrant Officer Sergei Shmygin discovered the remains of Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov. All the men found were badly burned. The divers then cut more holes in the hull to access other compartments. They recovered a total of 12 bodies from compartment 9, contradicting earlier statements about the timing of the crew's deaths. Radiation measurements inside and outside the submarine showed normal levels. On 21st August, after confirming no survivors in compartment 9, Russian officials announced the crew's tragic fate. Admiral Popov addressed the nation, expressing regret and seeking forgiveness from the families. Efforts to recover more bodies faced challenges, including disagreement over contracts and concerns for rescuers' safety. President Putin declared a day of mourning, and posthumous honors were awarded to the crew, recognizing their sacrifice. On the day of Putin's broadcast, Deputy Prime Minister Valentina Matviyenko, leading a special commission, announced comprehensive support for the families of the Kursk sailors. In addition to 10 years' salary, they would receive free housing in a Russian city of their choice, free college education for their children, and free counseling. Together with donations from around the world, the families received approximately $35,000 in payments. The Russian government, in a $65 million salvage operation, contracted Dutch companies Smit International and Mammoet to raise the wreck of the Kursk submarine from the seabed. The operation was risky due to potential radiation from the reactor and unexploded torpedoes. Initially, divers detached the bow to prevent destabilization during lifting and to check for unexploded warheads. After 10 days, the bow was separated. Other salvaged pieces included parts of the torpedo tube, compressed air cylinder, sections of the frame and partition, and a fragment of the sonar system dome. These were analyzed to determine the cause and nature of the disaster. To transport the Kursk submarine, Mammoet converted the Giant 4 semi-submersible deck barge. They modified it extensively, cutting a hole for the submarine's sail and fitting it with saddles to hold the Kursk's hull. Special equipment, including hydraulic strand jacks and cable reels, was installed to raise the submarine. Divers worked in shifts, cutting holes in both the barge and submarine hulls and guiding cables through them. Grippers were then lowered to secure the submarine. 26 hoisting cables, each capable of lifting 900 tons, were attached to the grippers. The submarine was slowly raised and joined beneath the barge. After a 15-hour operation, the Kursk was raised completely. It was transported to the Roslyakovo shipyard in Murmansk, under the barge. Custom pontoons were used to lift the barge in a dry dock, allowing the Kursk to be detached. Initially, the Russians planned to raise the bow of the Kursk from the seafloor, fearing undetonated torpedoes. However, they deemed it too risky and decided to destroy it in place. Some analysts speculated that this decision was to safeguard classified debris from foreign access. Eventually, in September 2002, the remaining bow was destroyed on site. After the Kursk submarine disaster, 24 men survived in compartments 6 through 9, most gathered in the 9th compartment, led by Captain Lieutenant Dmitry Kolesnikov. They wrote notes indicating their dire situation, mentioning carbon dioxide buildup and pressure increase. The escape hatch remained unused. Its operability from the inside was uncertain. Analysts believe the sailors awaited rescue, as they were close to shore during a naval exercise. However, survival was unlikely due to cold water and injuries. Debate arose over their survival duration, with conflicting accounts ranging from hours to days. Rescue efforts were hampered by poor organization and delayed foreign assistance. Tragically, no survivors were rescued. After the Kursk was brought ashore, military doctors set up a temporary lab at a hospital in Severomorsk. The hull was exposed after water was drained from the dry dock. Salvage teams cut into compartments to drain water and removed missiles from the hull. Investigators entered the hull on October 23rd, followed by teams analyzing debris and identifying remains the next day. Potassium superoxide cartridges were found in the 9th compartment, used for oxygen generation. Autopsies revealed burns on 3 men due to an accidental chemical explosion triggered by a dropped cartridge. Kolesnikov and 2 others attempted to recharge the system, causing the explosion. Some crewmen briefly survived the fire by submerging underwater, but the flash fire depleted oxygen, leading to death by anoxia. Water seeped in, leaving a small air pocket with only 7% oxygen when rescuers arrived. Bodies from the 9th compartment were identifiable, while those from the 3rd to 5th compartments were badly damaged. Forensic examination revealed extensive skeletal injuries in some crew members, indicating a powerful explosion. 1 sailor was found embedded in the 2nd compartment ceiling, and 3 crewmen's bodies were completely destroyed by the blast and fire. Sadly, the rescue attempts failed. The Kursk's hull was too damaged, and the technology just wasn't there yet to reach them at such a depth on time. After days of agonizing hope, it became clear there were no survivors. The Kursk disaster plunged Russia into mourning. Gold Rush Country, later renamed the town of Gold Rush, opened its doors on December 11, 1986. It boasted 2 main attractions, the Eureka Mountain Mine Ride and the Thunder River Rapids Ride. Although the Thunder River Rapids Ride looked like it was made by Intamin, it actually wasn't. In 1983, a company from Sydney was hired to provide the boats for the ride. The Thunder River Rapids Ride became one of the favorite attractions at Dreamworld until it shut down. At the time, when the Thunder River Rapids ride closed, it was one of Dreamworld's 9 family-friendly attractions, sharing space with rides like Dreamworld Express, Escape from Madagascar, Gingy's Glider, Mad, Jungle Jam, Rocky Hollow Log Ride, Shockwave, Skadoosh Bumper Cars, and Vintage Car Adventure. Each circular raft on the ride could hold up to 6 riders. Spanning 410 meters in length, the ride reached a top speed of 45 kilometers per hour. A full ride cycle typically lasted about 4 minutes, offering visitors an exciting and enjoyable experience. Before boarding the Thunder River Rapids ride, riders would wait in a long indoor line that zigzagged back and forth. The line crossed over a section of the ride's water storage area before leading to the circular boarding station. Originally, this station had a spinning platform that made it easier for riders to get on and off the boats without the need for boats to stop. Once riders hopped into one of the circular rafts, which could hold up to 6 people, the raft began its journey. It passed by the waiting line and entered a cave. Exiting the cave, riders experienced the main rapid-filled part of the ride. This part ran alongside a big water reservoir, which stored water for the Thunder River Rapids ride. After that, the raft went under the station of the Eureka Mountain Mine ride and circled back toward its own station. Before leaving the ride, guests were lifted back up to the station level by a conveyor belt. On October 25, 2016, a malfunction occurred on the Thunder River Rapids ride, leading to the tragic deaths of 4 individuals. This incident is considered one of the most severe accidents to happen at an Australian theme park since the Sydney Ghost Train fire at Luna Park, Sydney in 1979. Because one of the 2 main water pumps that kept the ride operational stopped working, the water level in the ride dropped fast. This left one raft with 6 people on it, stuck on the rails near the end of the ride, unable to get to the unloading area. About a minute later, another raft carrying 6 passengers came down the conveyor and crashed into the stranded raft. Both rafts moved up because of the conveyor's motion, but the first one fell back down onto the rails. The second one got pushed up, and some people either fell out or got trapped near the conveyor, leading to 4 passengers suffering fatal injuries. After the park staff turned off the conveyor belt, the 2 children who survived managed to climb out of the second raft, which was still upright, onto nearby platforms. Fortunately, both kids didn't seem to be physically hurt, but they were taken to the hospital and offered counseling to help them cope with the traumatic experience. Over 7 paramedic crews, along with firefighters and police, rushed to the scene after the emergency call. They worked to retrieve the bodies of the deceased, which were severely injured from being crushed and compressed. Dreamworld issued a statement on its website and Facebook page, stating, "Dreamworld is currently closed until further notice due to an incident at the park. We are deeply shocked and saddened by the tragic incident. Our hearts and thoughts go out to the families involved and their loved ones." Dreamworld initially planned to reopen on October 28th for a special memorial service for the victims. However, discussions with the Queensland Police were needed because the ride area was being treated as a crime scene. Unfortunately, the reopening scheduled for October 28th had to be cancelled on October 27th. Gold Coast Mayor Tom Tate expressed his condolences to the affected families and pledged financial and emotional support to everyone involved. Australian Prime Minister Malcolm Turnbull also offered his condolences and support, sharing a statement on Twitter. On October 29th, the Queensland government announced a series of safety inspections and an audit of state workplace health and safety laws. In response to the incident, Busch Gardens Tampa in Florida, USA, temporarily closed its Congo River Rapids ride until the cause of the Dreamworld incident was determined. After a thorough review and safety check, the ride was reopened on October 26th. On November 9th, Ardent Leisure's CEO, Deborah Thomas, made an announcement that the Thunder River Rapids ride would be shut down permanently as a mark of respect to the victims and their families. She also mentioned that the families would be welcome to contribute to the creation of a memorial in its spot. Following this decision, the ride was taken apart and the area was cordoned off. In a report submitted to the Queensland coroner in October 2017, the police recommended that no criminal charges be brought against anyone involved. On February 24, 2020, Queensland coroner James McDougall published a report that revealed irresponsible, dangerous, and inadequate safety measures at the theme park, which played a part in the 4 tragic deaths. He suggested that the Queensland Office of Industrial Relations look into the possibility of legal action. The ride had been experiencing frequent malfunctions in the days before the accident, and there were various design and construction flaws that also contributed to the incident. Mr. McDougall told a Brisbane court Dreamworld had a reputation as a modern, world-class theme park, yet its safety and maintenance systems were rudimentary at best, and that he would refer Dreamworld's parent company, Ardent Leisure, to the Queensland Office of Industrial Relations. He said Ardent Leisure may have committed an offense under workplace laws. On July 21, 2020, it was announced that Ardent Leisure, the parent company of Dreamworld, faced 3 charges under the Work Health and Safety Act. These charges were brought by the Work Health and Safety prosecutor and were filed at the Brisbane Magistrates Court. The case was first heard on July 29th at the Southport Magistrates Court. However, on July 28, 2020, the day before the trial was scheduled to begin, Ardent Leisure pleaded guilty to the charges. Subsequently, in September 2020, they were fined $3.6 million for breaching the Work Health and Safety Act. Additionally, a settlement amount of $2.1 million was paid to the family of one of the victims. In 2018, the remaining structures of the Thunder River Rapids ride were demolished. Then, on August 23, 2019, the park revealed plans for a new roller coaster called Steel Taipan, set to open in 2021. This new attraction would also occupy some of the space previously used by the Eureka Mountain Mine ride. Overall, Ardent Leisure reportedly paid over $5 million in compensation to the families of the victims, as well as to emergency responders and witnesses. Additionally, a memorial garden honoring the victims was constructed near the location of the Thunder River Rapids ride. The sunshine and laughter that filled Dreamworld that day were replaced by screams of terror and a chilling silence. The malfunctioning ride, the desperate struggle for survival turned in an unspeakable tragedy. Cindy Lowe, Kate Goodchild, Luke Dorset, and Ruzi Aragi, who boarded the Thunder River Rapids ride with smiles and anticipation, never walked out. Their families were left shattered, the theme park faced immense public outrage, and the amusement park industry underwent a critical reevaluation of safety protocols. The Thunder River Rapids ride stands as a chilling reminder of the importance of prioritizing safety over profit. It's a story that serves as a stark warning, a somber echo of the day fun turned into a nightmare. The Ghost Train was one of Luna Park's first attractions, situated between the Big Dipper Station and the River Caves. Originally, the building housing it was planned as a storeroom for equipment awaiting installation after arriving from Luna Park Glenelg. Architectural plans for the Ghost Train can be found at the State Library of New South Wales. Guests were attracted to the ride by a looped recording promising the creepiest, spine-tingling ride of your life, declaring, "You'll shiver and quake on the Ghost Train." Once inside, cars would pass through a doorway marked Hell's Doorway. The ride then took passengers on a series of twists and turns in total darkness along a 180-meter electric track. Most of the ride was pitch black. The ride was lined with dancing skeletons, an ape monster, a dragon's head, Dracula in a graveyard, and a skeleton in a box. The ride also featured a fake fireplace, which, according to witnesses, is where the actual fire originated. A fire broke out inside the ride around 10:15 p.m. on June 9, 1979. Approximately 35 people were believed to have been on the ride when thick smoke began to escape from the tunnel doors. Staff immediately raised the alarm and began evacuating people from the ride as their cars exited the tunnel. However, due to a combination of factors including low water pressure, understaffing within the park, and inadequate coverage of the Ghost Train by the park's fire hose system, the fire quickly engulfed the ride. It took an hour to bring the fire under control, but thankfully it was extinguished before any significant damage could be done to the adjacent river caves and Big Dipper attractions. Initially, it was believed that everyone had managed to escape the fire unharmed. However, the bodies of 7 individuals were tragically discovered inside the ride. John Godson and his 2 children, Damien and Craig, along with 4 Waverly College students, Jonathan Billings, Richard Carroll, Michael Johnson, and Seamus Rahilly. At the time of the fire, investigating police speculated that the 7 victims had exited their cars and attempted to find their way out of the tunnel, but unfortunately, they were unable to escape. Had they remained inside their cars, they might have had a chance of survival. Witnesses who were evacuated from the ride reported seeing empty cars emerging from the tunnel engulfed in flames. When asked about the victims' chances of survival, each person interviewed expressed that they believed the chances were 0. Following the tragic incident, Luna Park was immediately closed down for a federal investigation. An inquest took place in the Coroner's Court of New South Wales from August 13th to 29th, 1979, presided over by Coroner Kevin Sidney Anderson in Glebe, Sydney. On September 3rd, 1979, Anderson released his findings. He determined that the exact cause of the fire could not be definitively determined. Expert testimony suggested that the ride's permanent wiring and attractions were unlikely sources of ignition, but this couldn't be completely ruled out. Anderson noted that witnesses reported ride patrons often disregarding no smoking signs and littering, potentially leading to the ignition of flammable materials by a discarded cigarette or match. However, he said that the evidence didn't provide a clear answer on how the fire started. Anderson's inquiry delved into issues beyond determining the source of ignition. He discovered that Luna Park's management had neglected to establish an effective fire suppression program, despite receiving recommendations from both the North Sydney Council and the fire department 18 months prior. In his report, Anderson concluded that while the park's owners and management had indeed failed in their duty of care toward patrons, their negligence did not reach the level required to support a charge of criminal negligence. However, this failure to fulfill their duty was still significant. In response to these findings, the government of New South Wales called for new tenders to operate the park on 31st July. Prior to the fire, a Sydney design consultant had advised Luna Park management to install a sprinkler system in the ghost train in December 1977, after inspecting the park for potential renovations. Unfortunately, this recommendation was not implemented. In 1987, a government inquiry conducted by the National Crime Authority reopened the investigation into the fire. However, no new evidence was presented. It was discovered that the initial police investigation into the incident had been inadequate, and the coronial inquiry was deemed ineffective. Despite various claims, ranging from faulty wiring to sabotage aimed at closing down and demolishing the park, the exact cause of the fire has never been definitively established. In May 2007, Anne Buckingham, the niece of Sydney underworld figure Abe Saffron, made a claim in an interview with the Sydney Morning Herald that her uncle was behind the fire. Saffron had been linked to 7 other arson attacks in the 2 years following the ghost train fire, despite repeatedly denying any involvement in the ghost train incident. Buckingham alleged that the attack was part of a scheme for Saffron to gain control of Luna Park's lease. However, she also stated her belief that the deaths of the 7 individuals were not intended as part of the plan. Former park artist Martin Sharp claimed that Saffron had approached Luna Park's owner, Ted Hopkins, several years prior to the fire, expressing interest in purchasing the park. Additionally, in 1985, NSW MP Michael John Hatton alleged that Saffron held beneficial ownership of the park. As a result of these claims, an inquiry was initiated, which concluded that while individuals associated with Saffron were indeed involved in supplying pinball and arcade games to Luna Park, there was no evidence linking Saffron himself to the ownership of the park. Buckingham later refuted the comments attributed to her and insisted that the story not be published. However, the Herald maintained that her original statements were recorded on tape during a face-to-face interview. The New South Wales Attorney General has mentioned that the coronial inquiry could potentially be reopened. However, this would necessitate the submission of new evidence to the police. In 1995, a memorial was erected in honor of the 7 victims of the 1979 fire. It featured a tree planted alongside an antique bench bearing the names of the victims. However, during the redevelopment of the park in 2003, the tree was removed and the bench went missing. Park director Warwick Doughty downplayed the significance of the memorial and related events, asserting they had little relevance. However, North Sydney Mayor Genia McCaffrey, along with others, disagreed and advocated for the reinstatement of the memorial. In 2004, a plaque listing the names of the victims was installed on an external wall of the Big Top Sydney, constructed on the former site of the ghost train. The plaque was intended to be the centerpiece of a mural painted by Martin Sharp, but the mural was never completed. On August 25, 2007, the North Sydney Council inaugurated a memorial park at Lavender Bay. Named the Art Barton Park after former park artist Arthur Barton, it features a bronze sculpture crafted by Michael Lunig as a tribute to the victims of the fire. Additionally, the chapel at Waverley College houses a plaque commemorating the 4 students who tragically lost their lives in the fire. The plaque includes a photo and the name of each boy, ensuring their memory is preserved for generations to come. In January 1979, Sharp brought musician Tiny Tim to Australia for a show at Luna Park, aiming to set a world record for the longest non-stop professional singing marathon. 5 months later, when the ghost train fire occurred, Sharp became convinced that the 2 events were somehow connected. He began documenting what he saw as synchronicities and theological connections between Tiny Tim's performance and the fire. Sharp also gathered evidence suggesting that the fire had been deliberately lit for a documentary titled Street of Dreams. Sharp worked tirelessly on the film for years, but never finished it in his lifetime. In 1988, a rough cut known as the Brighton Cut was compiled for film festival screenings. However, Sharp considered this version a work in progress, not a final product. Street of Dreams remains unfinished and has never been officially released. Despite this, the Brighton Cut has surfaced online as a low-quality bootleg. In March 2021, the Australian Broadcasting Corporation, ABC, aired a 3-part investigative series called Exposed: The Ghost Train Fire by journalist Caro Meldrum Hanna. The series delved into potential evidence surrounding the fire and interviewed surviving family members of the victims, judicial figures, police investigators, and former park staff. Witnesses, including those who rode the ghost train just before the fire, shared their accounts. Some initially mistook the artificial fire display for real flames but didn't realize the danger. Others, who entered soon after, noticed smoke and witnessed the fire spreading rapidly. They tried to warn ride operators, but some cars were already inside, adding to the chaos. The television investigation suggested a criminal connection involving Abe Saffron, former NS Dollars Premier Neville Wran, and former High Court Justice Lionel Murphy. Allegedly, Saffron ordered an outlaw motorcycle club to set the fire at Luna Park to gain control of the lease on the public land where the park was situated. The program's allegations prompted calls for a new coronial inquiry or royal commission into the case by Jody McKay, then leader of the NSW opposition. The program faced criticism for its claims against the late Premier Wran by several prominent figures, including former Premiers Carr and Unsworth, former Prime Minister Turnbull, and former ABC Managing Director David Hill. Following this, an inquiry into the program was established by the ABC board, led by Professor Rodney Tiffin and journalist Chris Masters. The inquiry found that while the program overstated its allegations against Wran, it uncovered suspicious evidence of arson, highlighted police incompetence in the investigation, and advocated for a new inquiry. In April 2021, after the release of Exposed: The Ghost Train Fire and public outcry, New South Wales Premier Gladys Berejiklian stated that relevant agencies in NSW were considering a fresh inquest into the incident. At the request of New South Wales State Coroner Teresa O'Sullivan, the NSW Police Force reopened their investigation and established Strike Force Sedgeman within its homicide division to conduct a review. To encourage witnesses to come forward, a reward of $1 million for fresh and significant information has been offered. As of November 11, 2023, the reward remains active. In conclusion, the story of the 1979 Sydney ghost train fire is a tragic and complex tale that has left lasting scars on the community. The investigation into the fire has uncovered suspicions of foul play, incompetence in the initial investigation, and allegations of corruption at high levels. Despite decades passing since the incident, justice remains elusive for the victims and their families. As we reflect on this devastating event, let us honor the memories of those who lost their lives and advocate for a thorough and transparent inquiry into the circumstances surrounding the fire. By seeking the truth and holding accountable those responsible, we can ensure that such a tragedy never occurs again. An aerial lift, also known as a cable car or ropeway, is a way to move things using cables. It can carry cabins, cars, gondolas, or open chairs above the ground. These systems are often used in places with lots of mountains where building roads is tough. They've been really useful in mining too. Since they're easy to move, people have used them to cross rivers and deep valleys. Recently, cities have started using gondola lifts as part of their public transportation because they're cheap and can be adjusted easily. The Cavalese cable car goes down from Mat Surmis, close to the Italian ski resort of Cavalese in the Dolomites, about 40 kilometers northeast of Trento. The cable car could hold up to 40 people or 7,000 pounds. But when the crash happened at 5:19 p.m., there were 43 people in it. The operator said it was okay because a lot of them were kids. On the crisp day of the March 9, 1976, the cabin fell about 70 meters down a mountainside. Then, it was pulled along the ground by the cable for another 100-200 meters before finally stopping in a grassy field. During the fall, a heavy part of the cable car machinery fell on top of the cabin, crushing it. This crushing was made worse because the cabin was dragged along the ground. Many of the people who died were not directly killed by the fall, but suffocated instead. In total, 42 people died, including 15 kids aged 7 to 15 and the 18-year-old cable car worker. At first, it was reported that 41 people had died with one missing, but later they found the missing person's body. Unfortunately, there was a mix-up, and one of the bodies, Fabio Rustia's, was mistakenly sent to Milan. Most of the people who died were from Hamburg, West Germany. On board, there were 21 West Germans, 11 Italians, 7 Austrians, and 1 woman from France. The only person who survived was a 14-year-old girl named Alessandra Piovesana, who was on a school trip with 2 friends. She later talked about what happened in court and became a journalist for a science magazine, but sadly, she passed away from an illness in 2009. Alessandra Piovasana survived because she was shielded by other people's bodies during the fall, and she was standing at the front of the cabin, which was less affected because of how the heavy machinery crushed the cabin. She shared her story in court, saying, "I was riding down with two friends, Francesca and Giovanni. We were standing at the front side of the cabin facing Cavalese. Everything seemed fine until we reached the middle pole, and suddenly the car stopped. We waited for about a minute. Then it started again, but it jerked, and someone in the cabin laughed. They joked around, but then there was a loud noise. I knew something was wrong and held on to Francesca. Then the cabin suddenly grabbed backward, and I felt like I was being lifted and pulled by my legs. I couldn't breathe. The fall, experts say, lasted only 3 or 4 seconds. 4 seconds before the crash. Some people saw death coming, especially those near the windows, as the cable car cabins have great views. 4 seconds might seem short, but in that moment, it felt like forever. I thought I was going to die. After we hit the ground, everyone seemed to stop screaming, and I could only hear my own voice. Then I passed out, but I woke up before help arrived. I tried to talk to Francesca, but she didn't respond. I saw Giovanni sitting on the ground, crying with his face in his hands. A child was screaming for their mom, and a man's voice said, "I'm going back to Milan right away, I'm going home." Then he went silent forever. Another voice, a woman's, said, "I want my son," and then she too went silent. After that, I tried to open the cabin's roof door. Help came soon after, and I wanted to call my mom to let her know I was okay. Next thing I knew, I was being taken to the hospital. In the investigation, it was found that the cables, one stationary and one moving, ended up crossing each other, with one cutting through the other. This likely happened because the cabin was going too fast as it passed over a pylon, possibly over 10 meters per second. To speed up the journey and reduce wait times for skiers, the cable car operators broke a lot of rules set by the manufacturer. They even messed with the speed control system near the pylons. Some skiers who rode the cable car before the crash said it didn't slow down near the middle pylon as it was supposed to. But it's worth noting that cables crossing each other on this type of cable car isn't totally unexpected, and there's a safety system that's supposed to stop the cabin if the cables touch. It did work this time, stopping the cabin suddenly after it passed the pylon. Witnesses said the cabin swung abruptly. The person operating the cable car, Carlo Schweitzer, was a seasonal worker who wasn't qualified to run cabins like these. The cable car companies were trying to save money by hiring unlicensed workers instead of licensed ones, or not letting them take the test to get licensed, because that would mean they'd have to pay them more. Carlo Schweitzer took the test a month after the accident and failed. When the cabin suddenly stopped because of the safety system, the operator didn't know what to do because he wasn't trained for that situation. He called his colleague, Aldo Gianmoini, for help, who told him to turn off the automatic safety system that had stopped the cabin because the cables crossed. Apparently, they'd done this trick before because the cables sometimes touched each other on a long stretch between stations, probably because the cabins were going too fast. Normally, there's a key to turn off this safety system, but it's supposed to be locked up and not used when passengers are on board. But this time, the cables didn't just touch, they overlapped. Turning off the safety system made the engine keep pulling the cabin even though the cables were crossed. This put too much strain on the support cable where the cables overlapped. Giorgio D'Amatteo, another operator in a cabin going the other way, noticed the overlap. From a distance, Giorgio D'Amatteo saw intense sparks and heard loud noise. He tried to call in the incident using the phone in the cabin, but it didn't work. About a minute and a half after they restarted the cabin without the safety system, the support cable broke. The full cabin, with 43 people inside, crashed to the ground, while the other cabin, with only one operator, got stuck in the air between the pylon and the middle station. The operator in the stranded cabin had to climb down with an emergency ladder. There was a delay between the cabin falling and the engine being stopped, which caused the cabin to be dragged along the ground for 100 to 200 meters. This delay was probably because the operator, Carlo Schweitzer, was inexperienced and confused. He said he had to hide under the control unit as the top part of the snapped cable swung back and hit the control room, breaking windows. During the trials, the lift officials denied that Carlo Schweitzer and Aldo Gianmoena had talked on the phone. 4 lift officials were eventually jailed for their negligence in the disaster. The once joyful slopes of Cavalese fell silent, echoing only with the cries of grief. 43 lives were cut short in a moment, leaving behind a trail of shattered dreams and unimaginable pain for families and loved ones. Alessandra Piovasana, the sole survivor, carried the physical and emotional scars of that day forever. The Cavalese cable car crash serves as a stark reminder of the importance of prioritizing safety. It forever changed the regulations governing cable cars worldwide, ensuring such a tragedy never repeats itself. But the loss remains. The 43 souls lost on that mountainside are not forgotten. Their memory lives on in the memorial that stands as a solemn tribute. Have you ever been spelunking, exploring those dark, mysterious caves? It's an adventure for sure, but it can also be dangerous. Today, we're diving into a real-life cave disaster that gripped the world in 1925. The story of Floyd Collins and his fight for survival in the depths of Sand Cave. Imagine you're spelunking with friends, having a great time. Then disaster strikes. You get stuck, not just stuck anywhere, but stuck deep underground in a narrow passage with darkness all around you. Panic starts to rise. Every breath feels heavy. This is exactly what happened to Floyd Collins, a seemingly ordinary man who became an overnight sensation, but for the worst reason possible. So, buckle up and join us as we delve into the depths of Sand Cave and explore the tragedy of Floyd Collins. We'll separate fact from fiction, uncover the challenges of the rescue attempt, and see how this event forever changed the world of cave exploration. William Floyd Collins was born on July 20th, 1887, on the Collins family farm, about 4 miles east of Mammoth Cave near the Green River in Kentucky. He was the third child of Leonidas Lee Collins and Martha Jane Burnett. Floyd had 7 siblings. Floyd started exploring caves by himself when he was just 6 years old, looking for Native American artifacts to sell to tourists at the Mammoth Cave Hotel. In 1910, he found his first cave, Donkey's Cave, on the family farm. 2 years later, a geologist named Edmund Turner hired Floyd to show him caves in the area. Together, they discovered Dawsey's Dome Cave in 1912 and Great Onyx Cave in 1915. When Floyd's mother passed away in 1915 from tuberculosis, his father, Lee Collins, later married Cyrilda Jane, Miss Jane Buckingham, a widow and Mammoth Cave guide. In September 1917, while climbing a bluff on the Collins farm, Floyd felt cool air coming from a hole in the ground. He widened the hole and dropped down into a cavity blocked by rocks. By December of that year, after more digging, Floyd found the sinkhole entrance to what he called Great Crystal Cave. Floyd's father, Lee Collins, gave him half ownership of the cave, and they decided to open it to the public. The whole family worked hard to prepare the cave for tourists, and it officially opened in April 1918. But because it was so remote, not many tourists visited. Floyd Collins was on a mission to find a new cave near Mammoth Cave to attract more visitors and make more money. He made a deal with 3 farmers that if he found a cave, they'd share the work of running it together. Working alone, Floyd explored and widened a hole for 3 weeks, turning it into what would later be called Sand Cave by the news. He squeezed through tight passages, some as small as just 9 inches tall. He said he found a big chamber, but no one confirmed it. He spent hours each day for weeks making the cave easier for tourists to visit. But on January 30th, 1925, disaster struck. Floyd's lamp started to dim while he was working deep in the cave. Trying to leave before he was left in complete darkness, he got stuck in a small passage. His lamp fell, leaving him in total blackness. As he tried to feel his way out, he accidentally stepped on what he thought was a solid part of the cave wall, but it wasn't stable, and a huge rock fell from the ceiling, trapping his leg. Loose gravel then buried him completely. He was stuck 150 feet from the entrance, alone and unable to move, with no one to hear his cries for help. It was a terrifying and harrowing situation, knowing that he might never be found. The next day, neighbors got worried when they didn't see Floyd around. They tried to find him, but the small passages in the cave scared them. They got close enough to talk to him and found out he was trapped. They called his younger brother Homer, who was brave enough to crawl through the tight spaces to reach Floyd. Reporter Skeets Miller, Lieutenant Robert Burden, and family friend Johnny Gerald also joined in the effort. Homer brought Floyd food and drinks to keep him going, while locals and tourists brainstormed ways to rescue him. On February 2nd, 1925, they tried to lift Floyd out using a harness and rope, but it didn't work. It ended up hurting Floyd even more, pulling him against the rocky ceiling. So, they decided to carefully dig out the rocks around him and remove the big one pinning his foot. As time passed, they managed to run an electric light down the passage to give Floyd some light and warmth. But outside the cave, things got chaotic. Hundreds of people gathered, some not knowing what they were doing. They lit campfires that melted the natural ice in the cave, creating puddles of cool water, including one where Floyd lay. Then, on February 4th, Parts of the cave collapsed because of the melting ice. They tried to dig through to Floyd, but it was too dangerous. So they decided to dig a shaft straight down to reach him. Rescue efforts were organized, but they faced a big challenge. The cave sucked air in, so they couldn't use any machines that would create fumes and suffocate Floyd. They had to dig a 55-foot shaft by hand, using just pickaxes and shovels. They thought they could do it in 30 hours, moving about 2 feet per hour. At first, things went smoothly, but around 10 feet down, the shaft got so narrow that only 2 men could work at a time. And then they hit big rocks, slowing them down. They used pulleys to remove the rocks, but progress was slow. They rigged up a radio to Floyd's light bulb, hoping it would detect any movement from him. It crackled 20 times a minute, giving them hope that Floyd was still alive and breathing. Newspaper reporter William Burke Skeets Miller from the Courier-Journal in Louisville was on the scene reporting on the rescue efforts. Despite his small size, Miller worked hard, digging a lot of earth from around Collins. He even got to interview Collins in the cave, which earned him a Pulitzer Prize for his coverage. Miller's reports were sent by telegraph and printed in newspapers all over the country and even abroad. Radio stations broadcasted regular updates on the rescue efforts. As the media attention grew, so did the crowds of tourists, reaching tens of thousands at one point. Collins's neighbors sold hamburgers for 25 cents, and other vendors set up stands selling food and souvenirs, making it seem like a circus. The Sand Cave Rescue became one of the biggest media events between the world wars. It even involved Charles Lindbergh, who had a minor role in the rescue by flying photographic negatives from the scene for a newspaper. Since the nearest telegraph station was miles away, amateur radio operators stepped in to pass messages to the authorities and the press. On February 11, 1925, they found out that Floyd's light bulb had gone out, so they couldn't see if he was still alive. They had dug a 55-foot shaft and a tunnel leading to where Floyd was. And finally, on February 16th, miner Ed Brenner reached him. But when they found him, Floyd was cold and seemed dead. Floyd's friend, Johnny Gerald, and a few others went into the tunnel to identify the body. Dr. William Hazlitt and Captain C.E. Francis tried to reach the Floyd body but couldn't, so Brenner went ahead and followed their instructions to officially declare Floyd dead. It was estimated Floyd had been dead for 3 to 5 days, with February 13th being the most likely date of his death. After Floyd Collins was found dead in the cave, his body remained there and funeral services were held on the surface. His brother Homer was not pleased with Sand Cave as his brother's grave, and 2 months later, he and some friends reopened the shaft. They dug a new tunnel to the opposite side of the cave passage and recovered Floyd Collins' remains on April 23, 1925. They took Floyd's body to Cave City for embalming and held a visitation at the funeral home. Then, on April 26, 1925, they buried him on the hillside overlooking Great Crystal Cave, which was renamed Floyd Collins Crystal Cave. But things took a strange turn. The new owner of the cave, Dr. Harry Thomas, put Floyd's body in a glass-topped coffin and displayed it in Crystal Cave for many years. Then, on the night of March 18th and 19, someone stole the body. It was later found in a nearby field, but his injured left leg was missing. After this awful event, Floyd's remains were kept in a secluded part of Crystal Cave in a chained casket. In 1961, Crystal Cave was bought by Mammoth Cave National Park and closed to the public. The Collins family didn't want Floyd's body on display anymore, so the National Park Service reburied him at Mammoth Cave Baptist Church Cemetery in 1989. It took 15 men 3 days to remove the casket and tombstone from the cave. It was a sad and disturbing end to Floyd Collins' story. Floyd's fight was over, but his story touched millions. The whole country felt the pain of losing a man they never met. Maddie, heartbroken, held on to the memory of her brave explorer husband. But Floyd's story wasn't just about sadness. It woke everyone up to the dangers of exploring caves. New gear was built, and training became a must to prevent another terrible event. Inspired by Floyd's bravery, cavers vowed to learn more about these hidden worlds, treating them with respect and caution. Have you ever felt the thrill of exploring a hidden world? Deep beneath the surface, caves offer a glimpse into a secret kingdom of glistening rock formations and silent pools. But this mysterious beauty can hold a dark secret. Cave diving, the daring adventure of venturing underwater into these hidden caverns, is an activity that pushes the limits of human exploration. However, it can also be a dance with death. Today, we're diving into the tragic story of Simon Halliday, an experienced cave diver who lost his life in the treacherous waters of Lancaster Hole, England. Lancaster Hole is no ordinary cave. It's a gateway to the vast 3-county system, a labyrinth of underwater passages stretching for miles. This complex system is a playground for expert cave divers, but even for the most skilled, it can become a deadly trap. In January 2020, Simon became another victim of the unforgiving nature of cave diving. This wasn't just a random accident. Reports suggest Simon might have been using unproven equipment, a rebreather that failed him in the unforgiving depths. This raises chilling questions. Was it a malfunction, a human error, or something more sinister? Join us as we explore the thrilling world of cave diving. We'll uncover what went wrong at Lancaster Hole. This isn't just Simon Halliday's story. It's a warning for anyone who dreams of exploring caves. Even the most skilled divers face risks, and underestimating them can be deadly. So get ready for a ride filled with surprises, fear, and ultimately the bravery of those who dare to explore the unknown. Simon Halliday, a 49-year-old resident of Clitheroe, Lancashire, was no stranger to the thrill of cave diving. After a break, he had recently reignited his passion for the sport during a trip to Egypt. He was a respected member of the northern section of the cave diving group, CDG, a community dedicated to the safe exploration of underwater caves. The three-county system is a huge maze of caves under Cumbria, Lancashire, and the Yorkshire Dales. It's a challenging place for experienced cave divers. Lancaster Hole is the entrance to this hidden world, but only the most skilled and prepared divers should go further. Cave diving is different from regular diving. There's no easy way to swim up to the surface. Divers have to move through narrow passages, using special gear and careful planning to come back safely. In the three-county system, there's a part called the downstream passage that cave divers found fascinating. It went about 900 meters past a deep pool of water called a sump. This area was mostly unexplored, tempting adventurous divers like Simon with the chance to find something new. On that fateful day in January, Simon, along with two friends, David McDonough and Kevin Gannon, embarked on an expedition to explore further into the downstream passage. Simon told them that his solo dive wouldn't last more than 3 hours, as reported in the inquest at Cockermouth Coroner's Court by the Westmoreland Gazette. Simon had the necessary equipment and gases to navigate the treacherous environment. He was using a rebreather that was still being developed and wasn't sold commercially. He got it from a sporting goods company called Sump UK. However, when the 4-hour mark arrived and Simon hadn't surfaced, his friends David McDonough and Kevin Gannon knew something was wrong. Tragedy struck during the dive. Simon Halliday never resurfaced. They called for help. Search and rescue efforts began immediately. Rescue diver Anthony Seddon entered the underwater passage and found Simon deceased about 14 minutes and 60 meters into the dive. When Simon was recovered, the oxygen supply pipe from his rebreather appeared to be disconnected or ripped out. This could have happened during the dive or while recovering his body. Data from Simon's dive computers suggested his rebreather malfunctioned, forcing him to switch to his backup air supply. The exact reason for the malfunction remains unclear. One possibility was equipment failure. Rebreathers, while useful, are complex and require careful maintenance and configuration for each dive. A malfunction could have left Simon without a reliable source of breathing gas. Another possibility is getting stuck. The narrow passages in the downstream passage could be dangerous. If his diving gear got caught on a rock or something else, he might not have been able to get loose. The unforgiving environment itself is another factor. Cave diving requires divers to manage their air supplies very carefully. Any unexpected delays or problems can quickly deplete their reserves, leaving them with no way to reach the surface. The inquest also revealed that this was not Simon's first time on this dive. However, his team noted that there was more water flowing through the passage than usual on January 4th. Simon didn't see this as a problem, but the stronger current may have used up more air on his return journey as he fought against it. This problem could have been worse if Simon was under stress and breathing heavily because his air was running low. The increasing emptiness of his air canisters would have also made him more buoyant, forcing him to use more energy to stay down in the passage and avoid hitting the roof. Simon Halliday's story is a tribute to a passionate cave diver who lost his life doing what he loved. It's also a reminder of the importance of respecting and preparing for the challenges of cave diving. Cave divers boldly explore new frontiers, armed with careful planning and an understanding of the dangers, all driven by a desire for discovery. Have you ever looked out at a calm lake and thought, "This is perfect, a picture of peace"? The sun warms your skin, a gentle breeze whispers through the trees, and the water invite you in for a refreshing dip. It's the ideal spot for a family outing, a chance to relax and soak up the beauty of nature. But what if that perfect picture hides a dark secret? A mother and her son, full of laughter and excitement, embark on a boating adventure on a seemingly tranquil lake. The sun shines off the water, and the only sound is the gentle lap of waves against the hull of their boat. They spend hours swimming, splashing, and creating memories that will last a lifetime. But beneath that seemingly tranquil surface, danger lurks. Strong currents, unseen drop-offs, and sudden wind blast can transform a picture-perfect day into a terrifying struggle. During a seemingly normal outing with her son Josie, Naya Rivera faced a chilling reality. What began as a fun mother-son adventure turned into a nightmare. As the winds whipped up the lake, creating treacherous waves, Naya found herself in a desperate struggle with her son's safety at stake. In a heartbreaking moment, she had to make a choice that would change their lives forever. This is the story of Naya Rivera, a talented actress and a devoted mother, and the terrifying ordeal that unfolded on a seemingly ordinary day at Lake Peru. In this video, we'll delve into the harrowing details of what happened, the hidden dangers that lurk beneath the surface of calm lakes, and the importance of water safety. Join us as we explore this heartbreaking tragedy and learn valuable lessons that could save lives. Lake Peru is a reservoir situated in the Los Padres National Forest in Ventura County, California. It gets its water from the Santa Clara River. Since at least 1993, Lake Peru has been the only lake in the county where swimming was allowed, making it a popular spot for visitors. However, over the years, there have been several drowning incidents at the lake. In 2020, the Lake Peru recreation area was closed to the public due to the COVID-19 pandemic. This closure began before April 4th and lasted until the area reopened on July 1st. Naya Rivera, an American actress and singer, had been a frequent visitor to Lake Peru for years leading up to 2020. She reportedly considered it a sanctuary. For Naya Rivera, her outing at Lake Peru would end tragically. Rivera, age 33, was a multi-talented individual and a shining star in the entertainment industry. Born on January 12, 1987, in Santa Clarita, California, she embarked on her acting journey at a young age, appearing in various television commercials and series. Her path to fame was characterized by determination, resilience, and a deep passion for her craft. Rivera's breakthrough came when she landed the role of Santana Lopez on the popular TV series Glee. Her portrayal of the sharp-tongued and complex character struck a chord with audiences worldwide. Rivera's singing prowess and acting skills shone brightly, earning her critical acclaim and a dedicated fan base. Through her character on Glee, she explored significant themes of self-acceptance and love, becoming an inspiration to many. Off-screen, Rivera used her platform to raise awareness and support for various causes close to her heart. However, life presented its challenges to Rivera, and she faced personal struggles and setbacks, yet her determination remained unwavering. She embraced motherhood with love and dedication, becoming a devoted mother to her son Josie, whom she adored. Motherhood brought immense joy and purpose to her life. Rivera's mother, Yolanda Prevatier, shared that Rivera and her 4-year-old son, Josie Dorsey, had planned a barbecue by Lake Peru on July 8, 2020. When they arrived, they decided to rent a boat for some fun. They left the dock around 1 p.m., expecting to return by 4 p.m. However, when they didn't come back, a search operation began. Dorsey, the son, was found at about 5 p.m., alone and asleep on the boat, wearing a life jacket. During the investigation by the Ventura County Sheriff's Office, Dorsey mentioned that he and his mother had jumped off the boat into the lake together for a brief swim. However, Rivera quickly asked him to return to the boat. The wind had picked up. Boats start drifting to rock violently, making it difficult for Rivera to get back on board. Dorsey recalled that his mother tried to climb back onto the boat but was unable to do so and disappeared underwater. He mentioned that she wasn't wearing a life jacket. Dorsey tried to find a rope on the boat to help his mother while she struggled. He watched as she reached up and called out for help. Despite his efforts to assist, Rivera couldn't get back onto the boat, and eventually she vanished beneath the water. The Ventura County Sheriff suggested that Rivera and Dorsey might have been caught in a rip current, which is common in that area of the lake, particularly in the afternoon. They might have had difficulty returning to the boat, which was found unanchored, and could have drifted from where they initially entered the water. He believed that Rivera probably used her strength to save her son, but couldn't save herself. Dorsey described how his mother pushed him back onto the boat, showing her efforts to protect him. After Dorsey was found around 5 p.m. on July 8th, 2020 in the Narrows, which is a deep and windy area at the north of the lake, a 911 call was made and a formal search and rescue operation began. During the search of the boat, an adult life jacket and Rivera's identification were discovered on board. Dorsey was interviewed later that evening on July 8th. Rivera's vehicle, a black Mercedes G-Class, was found in the parking lot near the dock. The sheriff's office suspended the search and rescue operation that evening and resumed the next day. The lake was closed to the public, with dive teams from across the region participating in the search. On July 9th, the sheriff's department confirmed to NBC that Rivera was presumed dead and that rescue efforts would now shift to recovery efforts. Initially, efforts were focused on land to determine if Rivera had made it out of the lake, but Dorsey's account and lack of evidence led them to change the search to recovery. Closed-circuit television footage of Rivera and her son arriving in the parking lot and leaving the dock on the boat was released. On July 10th, the number of divers involved was reduced from around 100 to about 40 due to poor visibility, making it more likely that Rivera would be found using sonar devices. In addition to dive teams and sonar, sniffer dogs were deployed on the lake. Rivera's parents, stepfather, brother Michael Rivera, ex-husband Ryan Dorsey, and close friend and Glee co-star Heather Morris joined the search team at the lake on July 11th and 12th. Morris had expressed a desire to conduct her own search around the shoreline and was in contact with the sheriff's captain in charge of the search. The sheriff's office discouraged civilians from attempting searches due to dangerous terrain and reiterated that they were conducting searches on both land and in the lake. On July 11th, the sheriff's office announced that other counties and a private contractor were assisting with the search. On July 13th, a body was discovered floating in Lake Piru by divers when the search resumed in the morning around 9:30 a.m. It was later confirmed to be Rivera's during a press conference held later that day. The body was found just north of Diablo Cove, and authorities stated that it was likely trapped in underwater vegetation before resurfacing. Rivera was officially declared dead on July 13th, although her death certificate indicates that she died within minutes. The Ventura County Medical Examiner released an autopsy report on July 14th, stating that the cause of death was an accidental drowning and no evidence of injury or intoxication was found. The complete toxicology report, made public on September 11, 2020, revealed that small amounts of prescription medications for ADHD and anxiety, as well as caffeine, were found in Rivera's system. However, her blood alcohol content was negligible at the time of her death, and the autopsy concluded that none of these factors led to intoxication or contributed to her death. During Rivera's disappearance, her fans showed support by posting messages of encouragement. However, some people felt frustrated as the sheriff's office repeatedly urged fans not to search on their own near Lake Piru's shore. Even though Heather Morris initially mentioned searching herself, she later joined authorities in asking people to stay away, as the rural terrain could be dangerous. Shortly after Rivera went missing, fans started a petition to have warning signs about swimming dangers put up at Lake Piru. During Rivera's disappearance, Lea Michele deleted her Twitter due to online harassment. While other Glee co-stars showed support, Michele stayed silent. Rivera had criticized Michele before, but there was no major feud. Michele faced backlash earlier in 2020 for her behavior on set, leading her to avoid social media. She received death threats for not addressing Rivera's disappearance. After her passing, Rivera was laid to rest at the Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Hollywood Hills, which is a cemetery where many people from the entertainment industry are buried. This happened after a private service held on July 24, 2020, attended by her family, close friends, and some members of the Glee cast. In November 2020, Ryan Dorsey, representing his son Josie and Naya Rivera's estate, filed lawsuits against Ventura County and Lake Piru's management. The lawsuits claim that there were no signs to warn of the dangers of the lake, and that the boat Rivera rented didn't meet safety standards. They argue that the boat didn't have essential safety equipment like flotation devices or a ladder. The lawsuit also seeks compensation for emotional distress, stating that Rivera knew she was in danger but couldn't reach her son. It criticizes the defendants for trying to discredit Rivera and shift blame with toxicology reports. After Naya Rivera's passing, Lake Piru remained closed to the public for more than a month. Initially set to reopen on August 17, 2020, the Holzer fire caused a delay, keeping the lake closed until August 20th. Although it reopened for fishing and boating, swimming is now prohibited at the reservoir. After death of Naya Rivera, a memorial was constructed at Lake Piru. Filipino director Drama del Rosario honored her during his acceptance speech at the PBS Short Film Festival, highlighting her role in promoting LGBTQ+ representation. Chris Colfer penned a tribute to her in Variety. The Gay Emmys renamed an award in her honor. Amber Riley performed a tribute on Jimmy Kimmel Live, and Rivera was remembered at the Primetime Emmy Awards and MTV Video Music Awards. Her death was compared to other notable losses in 2020, like Chadwick Boseman's. The Glee cast paid tribute to her at the GLAAD Media Awards. Naya Rivera's story is a heartbreaking reminder of the fragility of life and the unwavering strength of a mother's love. In the face of danger, her instinct was to protect her son at all costs. Even in her final moments, her love shone brightly, ensuring Josie's safety. While Naya's life was tragically cut short, her memory continues to inspire us. She leaves behind a legacy of talent, strength, and a love for her son that transcends even the deepest lake. Thank you for joining us on this journey through this difficult story. We hope it serves as a reminder to cherish every moment with your loved ones and to prioritize safety, especially when enjoying the beauty of nature. Before we go, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel for more true stories about tragedies and disasters. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an upload, and, most importantly, stay safe out there.